One advice that I will give you is like follow the photographer and the main stuff. And once you see that the main stuff's over and it's just like the party, record some of the party and then leave.
Yeah, the photographer usually has the schedule all sorted out, but a lot of times they get in the way. So like I keep an eye on them and then I get away from them.
Do the main stuff and then record some of them partying and dancing. And then after that, most of the main stuff should be over and you can leave.
Not really. I mean, it depends on how good of a video he's trying to do, but
it's not my video. I'm assisting.
They don't want the whole entire thing.
Okay, then yeah, maybe I don't know. That depends on whatever you have with that guy then.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Most people just want the highlights. They want the vows, the entrance, the first dance, the cake cutting.
I'm saying if he's assisting, he has to stay until the other guy's like, all right, let's go. You can't, I mean, maybe, I don't know. Depends on what you have set up, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked at the schedule. I was like, oh God. Like I was hoping it would be like around 11-ish and then end around maybe later, but it's like from 8 to 8.
Well, you could talk to the guy because if he's the main videographer, I'm pretty sure that the bride and groom or whoever's organizing their wedding gave him a list of the events and what the bride and groom wanted the most to be captured. More often than not, they'll point it out to you. We want this, we want that.
If you're getting paid, you gotta just do it. You guys just stay there.
Yeah. No, yeah, but it's good to know like the main things to focus on and when you can take a break and wait, you know?
Yeah. All right, anyway. So today we're gonna be talking about green screen and blue screen keying. Last time we talked about green screen, we talked about it more from the filming perspective, what you wanna try to do whenever you're filming a green screen to make it easier for this task. If you are going to be filming and editing your own green screen and keying it, you definitely want to do all the stuff we talked about with the cinematography aspect of it, because it's going to make it a lot easier on you when you're keying it out and you're trying to edit it out. If you don't have a good green screen, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult, or you might have to resort to something which will take a long time called rotoscoping, which we'll get into in just a second. But hopefully, if you're the editor, or if you're editing someone else's stuff, or you're editing your own stuff, you get footage that's evenly lit, doesn't have as much compression. It's compressed at a higher bit depth, and at a higher resolution, because those things are all going to really help the green screen to key out a lot better than if you have the opposite of those things. If you have a cheap camera, it doesn't capture as much data, it doesn't capture as much color information. So it actually makes it a bit harder to key out green screen on those things, which is why usually you'll find people talk about shooting it at a higher shutter speed and a higher frame rate, so that they capture it a little bit more clearly whenever there's a lot of movement. You don't want a lot of blur when there's movement in the hands and stuff, because that's a lot harder for the computer to figure out and key out. And that's why they'll usually shoot it at a higher shutter speed, and then in post-production, you will add motion blur to the footage to give it that natural look at 24 frames per second or whatever. If you're doing green screen work, you usually want to use something made for it, or effects like After Effects is a program that's used a lot for green screen. And there's some other ones or some plugins for different editing softwares that you can use that are made specifically for green screen. Some of them, like Premiere Pro and Final Cut, they come with their own built-in green screen keying software things that you can use pre-built in, but they typically don't have as clean of keys or as many functions and abilities as these other ones do that are specifically made for it. So if you do get some of that footage that's really hard to key out, those are the times you really need the dedicated green screen keying softwares or plugins that you won't get in just any normal editor. So something like After Effects or Photoshop, or I don't know, there's a bunch of other ones where you can look it up, a list of them, but they'll have better green screens. Or there's some softwares that are made just for green screen that you pay for and you just get it, or just a plugin for an editor, and that will really benefit you if you have any trouble with green screen or your keys aren't working out, because they just have a bit more functionality to them that allow them to have more more options to change things and make them better for the key to work out properly. So I'm gonna actually go into After Effects. I have this old footage that I found where I have a green screen, and as you can see, it's completely hideous. The green screen is it has creases everywhere. It has a bright spot on the right and dark on the left, so it's not evenly lit. It was recorded with a cheaper camera. I think it was like a Sony Handycam, and it was about 7 to 8 years ago that we made this. So there's a ton of mistakes in it. And so we're going to use this to kind of see if we can key it out and see if there's anything that's going to look good underneath. But what you're doing whenever you're using a green screen key, I'm going to do it in After Effects. And I'm actually using CS4, so it's kind of an older one. I think they have like CS6 was the last one they made before they went to just the online one, which is Creative Cloud. So I'm actually using an older one, so there's probably newer functionality to these than the one I have. But basically what you're going to do when you're using green screen and you're trying to key it out, you're going to go into it. You're going to use something. I use Keylight. That's like the built-in software that they have. There's also plugins you can get for After Effects if you want to get a little more in depth with it, where you have more functionality. But I'm just going to use the Keylight that they have with it. And you're just going to take that, drag it over to your footage, and it's going to open up this little box of the effects window. Yeah, I know. You should always iron out the green screen if you're using a cloth one like the one I have in the background on this footage. Definitely on set, you want to make sure that you iron it out, you stretch it out with some pins or some clamps, get that thing as even as possible. And you don't want that bright spot on the right screen right. You want to make sure that it's as evenly lit as can be, because if it's like this, it just makes it harder to key, because then the green looks different colors to the computer. The one on the right, it's a lot brighter.
Baby face.
That was like 8 years ago.
I know, you were like a teenager.
I was still an adult. It's a brand new adult.
Barely.
Yeah. So basically what you're going to do when you first try to key out a green screen is you're going to take this little eyedropper tool, and you're going to bring it. Most people say to bring it like as close to not as close, but like pretty close to your subject to try to key it out, because the main thing you're trying to key out when you're keying out green screen is right around them. You're trying to get out the line around them, the main thing, because you can always draw a mat around them to kick out the rest of the footage later, wherever they're not at. But whatever, you want to try to get the green screen out close to them. So I'm going to click right around here, and that's not that bad. It kicked out like a lot of the stuff that even at the bright spot, I didn't think it was going to get everything, but right away, right off the bat, you can see it kind of kicked out everything, even with an ugly green screen like that. The problems are going to come in when we have other footage on top and we can kind of see an outline underneath. An outline right around me where it's like a little bit white or gray or green, or it might even be cutting off my hair or something when I'm moving around. It might not look the best. So I'm just using a picture in the background, by the way. But so right away you can see like it's pretty good most of the time. Like it's going to kick out the green screen, especially if you have really good flat screen and it's evenly lit. You can pull a pretty good key from there. But if you're having any problems, there's a lot of other tools and things that you can use to make the key work a little better. One of the things most people say to do is to bring it into what's called screen mat. And now we can see from this that it didn't key out as well as you might think right away. So what this is showing us is whatever is completely black is going to be the stuff that is transparent. Arden asked, does CS4 have the Rotobrush feature? I don't think so. I know about it. But I've never used it on mine, so I don't believe it has it. I could probably search for it.
It's really good for subjects that have like hair, like if like the edges of hair that tend to be most noticeable when it gets cut off while you're keying.
Yeah, no.
I typically would like you would like first key out the green and then you go back into what do you call it, the screen mat that you're on right now. But use the Roto brush if you had like CS6, and kind of the Roto brush is like I think it's controlled by, it's like supposed to be controlled by artificial intelligence or something, so it like you kind of guide it to where you want it to catch the hairs of like someone's head, and it takes forever.
Yeah, it does.
It's tedious. It's even with a program that's meant to kind of do the hard legwork for you, it's still very tedious.
Right. Yeah, because roto masking is the most tedious, but then roto brush, using even that, it takes forever because you have to go frame by frame and make sure that it's selecting the right spots and kicking out the right things and not eliminating anything or adding anything that you don't want in there. So it's really annoying, and you have to go through it and remask it every single time. It's a lot of work, and we'll get into that in a minute too. But that is a tool that really helps, especially when you have bad green screen footage. You have to, if you're doing it at a professional level, you definitely are going to probably use something like rotoscoping or the roto brush to help rotoscope around your subject, which basically just means you're outlining what you want to keep in, and it's going to kick the rest of the stuff out that you didn't outline. So whenever you're green screening, you want to key out that color. Then you want to go into what's called the screen mat. So you'll do the view instead of looking at the source where we see the green screen with the source. We will go into the screen mat to see what it looks, what it's kicking out, what it's keeping in. And whatever's fully black, that's what it's kicking out. Whatever's fully white, that's what it's keeping in. And so as you can see, some of this stuff in the background that we don't want to the left, it's actually keeping in some of that color, and that's affecting the final image whenever we see the key, which would be, well, where would it, final result. So like at the bottom left, we can see there's wrinkles all over it. You did a pretty good job, but we can still see that it is affecting that image in the background, because the image in the background just looks like this. So as you can see, it wasn't as good as it originally looked when it's just on a black background. Depending on the background you have, you can get away with certain things like that, because it's not really going to be as noticeable if I was going to be on a black background. But if I was going to be on something like this, it instantly gets noticeable that there's a lot of stuff going on. So what you want to do is you go into the screen mat, and you go into the screen mat down here, and you're going to mess with the clip black and clip white, trying to get the whites completely white. We don't want any grays like we see on my clothes down in the middle, right below my neck. And we don't want any whites on the background that we want to key out. So we're going to try to up this and see if we can get it black without doing anything to me. It starts to do, once you start seeing it like gray out the subject that you're trying to keep in, then you want to bring it back a little bit, but you want to try to mess with it to get it just about as good as you can get it without affecting the subject. And then clip white, same thing. Just want to kind of, now this gets a little tricky because whenever you have somebody like Arden was talking about with hair is a little bit transparent. So typically speaking, the edges of hair, especially if you just have like a strand coming off of somebody's head, that you do actually want to have a little bit gray, because it's going to be more transparent than just a complete opaque thing. So you want to make sure that you're not completely blocking out everything, unless the person's hair I don't know, some hair, you know, it has strands that go out further, and some hair it's like pretty compact and packed down, so it won't have as much transparency to it. So you really want to like check that out and make sure you're not affecting that, but you do want to try to get your subject white. And with that, say that's pretty good. I mean, there's a little bit of gray near my ear and things like that, but for the most part, we got it back. So let's see what the final result is. Now it's a lot better. See, they're not seeing all those creases. We're not seeing all that stuff in the background. Like when I add myself to it, you're not seeing all those creases like we were before. So that's what you want to do whenever you have a green screen. There's obviously a lot more stuff you want to do when you are adjusting things. Excuse me. You want to, where am I at? Oh, here we go. Where is it at? Oh, do I have two of them on here? I don't know why I have that. I can't find it. Well, I'm just gonna say it because I can't really, I don't really know where it is right here. I haven't used this in a long time. But another thing you want to do is I look very sharp. I'm like the edges of the subject are very sharp. You want to soften those up a bit, and you typically want to add a little bit of like a light wrap or something to give the lighting of the background onto your subject just a tiny bit so that it looks like they're in the same area. You'll also want to color correct your footage, your actual subject footage or your background so that they match. They look like they're coming from the same place. And again, with the source footage, whenever you receive it, hopefully the people knew or you knew whenever you were recording it, what the light source was going to look like on your original footage. For something like this, where it doesn't really have a light source because it's just a picture, it doesn't matter too much. But if we were going to use a beach scene or if we were going to use a sunset, we want to try to match that lighting and the color temperature of that light in the background to the subject when we're actually recording the subject on set. So if the light is going to be coming from the left in our background footage or our background picture, then you would want the light to be coming from the left when you record the subject so that it matches. Otherwise, it's going to look weird. The shadows are going to be in the wrong spots, or the light's just going to be coming from the wrong direction, and it's not going to match like it should. So that's something that should come from the footage itself. If you're editing it, hopefully the people who recorded it are going to send it to you and it's going to look good. But and if you're recording it yourself, you just want to make sure to keep track of that. Have an idea of what you want in the background, what you're going to use before you start recording. That way you can match it as best you can before you bring it into post-production and try to fix everything there, because not everything can be fixed. But what you would typically do is soften the edges to make it look less sharp and less hard. And then you would color correct it, color and add some light wrap to it to make it look like your subject is in that area, that background area. Oh, it's called like feathering it a bit, which would be softening the edges and things like that. It's called feathering. And adjusting the spill. So another thing that happens is whenever you have it, sometimes there's spill on your subject, or there's like an outline of just green. That'll depend on how close they were to the green screen when they were recorded or not, and how bright it was, and different things like that. But there's a spill. You can mess with the spill and how hard and basically how much it chokes the subject. So whenever you're telling the green screen what to kick out, it'll try to outline your subject and leave them in. And you can tell the computer how much to then like choke it down, or how much to suppress that spill that still has that green outline so that it kind of takes it away. but you don't want to do it too far to an extent to where you're starting to cut off your subject's ear or their hair, and it's starting to make it look blocky and ugly. Hair is one of the main, like the hardest things to key out because it has those translucent things in it and it sticks out everywhere, and different people's hair is different. So some people might have their hair sticking out all over the place. And it's the hardest part to key out because it's sort of translucent. It tries to keep a lot of the information of the green screen, but also the subject in it. And the computer has a hard time figuring out whether it should key it out, what part it should key out, and what part it should leave in. So that'll probably be the biggest hurdle whenever you are shooting a subject, a human subject. But that's where those like the dedicated tools come in, and the spill suppression and all of that come in, so that you can kind of adjust the settings of how much you want to take out and how much you want to leave in, so that you can adjust how much the computer is doing. And then you try to get it as close as you can. And if you can't, that's when you have to start using tools like rotoscoping to scope around it. All right. So another thing I'll say about the green screen, let's say we were having, let's go back to our source footage. Let's say that bright spot didn't key out, and no matter what I did, it just wasn't going to get out of the way. One thing you want to look at is where your subject's moving. So in this, I'm not really moving around. It's getting blurry because it's like having to show me it, but I'm not really moving around too much. So another thing you want to do is create a garbage mat. Let me see if I can. Why is it not letting me see it? I know I have one on here. I don't. Like when I spell garbage, it's not coming up. This is not a mat choker, right?
Are you sure that's not only a Premiere thing?
Maybe. I swear it was on here too. Maybe right now.
Because like After Effects can do a lot more complicated masking than that.
Yeah.
It was more like
Yeah.
Garbage Mat was like a kind of like really cheap mask because it only had what, like 8 points.
Yeah. Some of the one, I think the biggest one had like 16 points. But like I said, I haven't used this in a while, so I'm a little, I don't remember exactly. So, but I do think people were using it, because one of the things you want to do if it's not doing what you want, like it's not having the outcome that you want, is you can usually draw around your subject and it'll kick out everything other than what you drew around. It's kind of like masking it. It's kind of like rotoscoping, but you just do it in a general way to get rid of as much as you can around the subject, so that you only have to key out a certain part of the screen.
Yeah, I guess I never really got why Garbage Mat was superior to masking in any way.
Yeah, I don't know. I just know like people do it to get, especially if there's like spots where you don't want it in, you just key that part. If my head never goes over there, then there's no point in me having that part of the footage in, you know what I mean? So you just like key out this part of the bright spot to try to get the green screen to key out as best you can, since that bright spot is so different than the dark spot in the bottom left corner of the footage. I just don't know what it's called on here to use it. So my bad,
Maybe
everybody.
maybe type the word point.
Point. Vanish point?
Hmm.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I have. Well, let me see.
I see screen mat there,
Where?
right above screen inside mask, right below that.
Below what?
On the key light, right below the key light, you have? Right
Oh,
there.
like inside mask right here.
No, the screen mat. One
Yeah, the
above
screen
that.
mat was like the black and the white.
Oh,
Um,
you can use the color, different colors also.
yeah.
I think might just be the pen tool. Where's the pen tool?
It's true. Might be. Where is the pen tool? Here it is. It could be, yeah. All right, let me see if that's it. So let's say we wanted to get rid of the bright spot, right, as much as we can without affecting me. Just draw something like that, and then where's the effect controller? Man, I
Is it
really
on
need
the
to
right
adjust
mask
this one.
interpolation?
Yeah, where's like reverse?
I think pen tool is right on the top, I think.
What was that?
Right next to the text, is it? You're on pen tool, yeah.
I don't know if this is it. Is it?
Hmm.
Man,
I don't think
too
so.
many,
I don't
too
have.
many,
Yeah, I don't have
many
my.
options here.
This is annoying. So I must have like I haven't used this in a while, so I don't know if I had. Oh, here it is. No, that's not it. Well, because what I want to do is I want to inverse this, but I don't know if it's going to just let me do that. Inverted. Oh, there we go. All right.
Usually either you can do it that way or there should be a button. The buttons like for the pen tool and stuff like that in regards to masking are always in the same place. They're like lower your mouse a little bit. They're always going to be around the viewfinder. Like not in the timeline, not on either side. They're always going to be right below that little menu right below the viewfinder.
Like in the preview. Yeah,
Up a
that's
little
what I'm
bit.
thinking. I think I
Yeah,
deleted
up a
some
little,
stuff back when I was
It's
doing it
always
before.
yeah, right above. Like move your mouse up like a few. Yeah, like that menu right below the viewfinder is usually where all those like tools are gonna be. Like the simple like masking and verse stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I think
I'm pretty sure in every edition, I don't think they would ever move it.
I don't know. Like I said, I'm not as. I mean, I know what tools I need to use. I'm just not as familiar with using this as I was before. Because I think I like what I have standard workspace. You know, it's bringing up all these things, and I'm like, well, shoot, where's the effects window? I mean, it's right here, but it doesn't have the mask. It has key light, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know. Anyway, sorry everybody. What you would do is basically you would find the window that has this information in it, and you would just basically try to key out everything that you don't need from this footage. Wherever I don't move my head, wherever I don't move my body, you just use that, and you would then set it to inverse so that it takes out the stuff, which won't let me do it. I don't know.
I think he might have made a shape.
I did, yeah. Well, I don't want to confuse everybody. Does everyone understand what you have to do in your green screening?
Maybe just refer them to the video that explained it a lot better And then if you have further questions, go to this video since you're mucking it up.
Yeah. So I don't remember which video said it the best. We watched a bunch of them. If you're trying to look in for After Effects, then you might want to watch a green screen removal like pro in After Effects. And then we're going to go into a few more things with green screening, like tracking and things like that. I'm not going to show you how it's done. We're going to go into some pictures and stuff I have set up. But basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to make a mask, a shape.
I think
You're trying to make a shape around your, trying to make a shape around your subject based on where they're moving in the screen. You never want to have anywhere they're moving cut out, because then part of their head or part of their face is going to get cut out when they move over there. So you always want to check the footage beforehand and make sure, okay, he never goes all the way over to that side of the screen. Does he? Oh, yep, I do. I went into it a tiny bit right there if you look. So then I made a mask that's too far over, because now part of my hair right there when I turn is getting cut out. So basically I'd have to reshape that part of the mask. I'd have to reshape part of that mask and make it outline everywhere I'm moving. And I can even make an animated mask that each frame or each couple of frames, I'm changing where it's at. And that's typically what you want to do if they're moving around quite a bit in the scene. If they're moving from left to right in frame, then what you want to do is make the mask and then animate it, which just means you're moving the placement of where it's at. So you're moving where the mask is located. So now instead of the mask being right here, we're going to move it over there, and then we're going to move it over here as I move my head. That way it's not affecting the subject, and it's just kind of giving them that outline. And you only want to try to keep, you don't want to try to keep too much if possible. The main part that you want to try to key out is around the subject. The rest of it doesn't matter because it's going to get keyed out anyway. Well,
so if I remember correctly, the first few videos break it down very well. Everything from rotoscoping to using the pencil to mapping it out. Each one explains like the different ways of doing it. So they're really well done. Sometimes we get to the points of these Zoom calls where it's more like Zoom chats, where it really is hard to give a visual aid other than to show the videos themselves. So I would recommend watching the videos. I wasn't feeling very well for part of the green screening, so I probably would have sent some of my favorites, but I was a little distracted and I only caught a few of them. But I'll go through them this weekend and send a few in the group chat for everyone. Or whoever wants me to send it through email, let me know too. And hopefully that'll help explain it a little bit better. But at least Koda taught you what not to do, because he screwed up a lot in that.
I gave the basic overview. So what you really want to do is like make that shape, keep as little as possible as you need to key out. Because even in this picture right here, where we see that he did a successful key on the right, you look over to the left, you can see some creases and things like that at the bottom left. If you look where the zebra zone logo is, you can see there's creases right on there on that green screen. So instead of trying to key it out and make sure that, because those parts are going to look like a different color to the camera, so it's going to look a bit darker. So the green is going to be a bit darker to the camera. So when you're telling it key out this part, it might not necessarily think this dark green is part of that. Also, he's holding a green item, so you really don't want to try to up the amount of green that it takes out too much, because it's going to start taking out that, I don't know, is that flute or something? So you definitely don't want to take out too much green, because it's going to start taking out that thing in his hand. Typically speaking, whenever somebody has something green, you don't want to shoot them in front of a green screen. If they're having a green shirt, or if they have green makeup on, you know, like an alien or something, you don't want to shoot them in front of a green screen. That's when you're going to use blue screen. And vice versa, if he's wearing blue like he is, then you got to shoot him in front of a green screen. Now, since he's wearing blue and he also has something green, they decided to just go ahead and shoot it in front of a green screen. There is let me see, there is also magenta screens. They're not as common at all because in people's skin tones, they have a lot of red. For the camera anyway, like skin tone is a lot of in the red channel. So when you're trying to key out something that's red, it starts keying out people's skin. And that's typically why red screens or magenta screens aren't used nearly as much as blue or green screens. But so anyway, so instead of trying to
He's
tell
holding a reflective flute and not green, because like there is green spilling onto his hands too.
Oh yeah, there is on his fingers, the front of his fingers, which is weird because it would not be coming from the flute, or would it be coming from something in front of him?
So yeah, I'm wondering if it's more of a light spillage problem.
That could be. But either way, you want to try to, that's why you want to try to make the mask around your subject. So you would just draw an outline. If he's just sitting in the same spot, he doesn't move, then we're just going to make a little outline around him. You don't have to be too close with it. You're not rotoscoping, which is drawing it almost exact. You're just drawing a line as much as you can to get around him so that you only have to key out the green that's right around his figure. And then whenever he's moving around, then you can start adjusting where that mask is, which is called animating that mask, and just basically moving where that mask is located. So instead of it being right here, he's moving his head to the left. So we have to move the mask a little bit to the left to make sure it's not cutting off any part of his head or hair. After you've done that, then you'll use the green screen to try to key out that line that's surrounding your subject now, to key out the rest of the background. And then when you're done, you can add any background you want. You can make him in a city, you can make him in space, you can make him in just a picture, you know, any background at all, any footage or picture you can put behind them and they will show up in front of it. As you can see in the picture, if you look at his face or you look at his clothes, there's a clear line where they're starting to color grade or color correct it to match it more to that background. Because it's very blue, it's very dark. They don't want those warm tones in his face and that really bright spots all over his clothes. So they're darkening it and they are adding a little bit more blue to his overall color. His jacket or his shirt, it's looking a little darker blue than it is in the green screen footage, where it's a little more of a turquoise. And that could be possibly due to the green screen as well. Sometimes when you're having green screen, it could be taking out the green part of turquoise, which would just leave blue, because turquoise is a combination of green and blue. And so sometimes when you are keying out a green screen, it will, if anything is green or anything has green tones in it, it will key that out along with the green screen, just because it's keying out that color. It's taking out all of that color from the whole screen. That's what it's doing. And that's why you're able to take out the entire background, because you're just saying this color doesn't belong, kick it out. But if there's any color like that in people's clothing or in their items that they're holding, sometimes it'll change the color of it or try to kick it out entirely if it matches too close to the green screen. So that could be a combination of both. It could be them just color correcting it, or it could be that when they keyed out the green screen, it took out the green and that turquoise color and made it that dark blue. But either way, whenever you do your footage, you try to color correct it to make it match. If you have it too bright, too warm, and you're having it in a really dark, cool setting, it's not going to match. It's going to be very obvious that it's green screen. So always try to color correct either the background or the subject to make them match. And sometimes you'll see editors that do both. They match the background a little bit to the subject, and they match the subject a little bit to the background just to kind of blend them together. Again, in this picture, we also see the same thing. Whenever he has the green screen portion, his shirt's a lot more white. You'll see it's a bit more warm, a bit oranger in the left. And since he's putting it in that kind of gray office space, modern day looking space. He's adjusting the colors just to make it match a little bit more to that aesthetic, that background. And as you can also see in this picture, this is another reason you want to mask. If you don't have a big enough green screen, if you're just having a green screen that covers just the actor, and if you can look to the left, you can see that he didn't have a green screen covering the entire frame. That's when you want to use those masks and that pen tool to really draw an outline around the subject so that all you see is green and him, and the rest of it's going to be basically thrown away or transparent at that point. If you didn't do that, it might key out the green screen, but then you'd still have that whole section on the left because it's not the same color and it wouldn't try to key that out. So even if you only have a little green screen or a tiny space, you can still make green screen work for the entire frame. You don't have to worry about the entire frame being covered with green screen. You'll just have to make a mask around your subject and it'll still work the same. The reason green screens are used the most is because a few reasons. One is the camera has twice the amount of data in the green channel than it does the blue and the red. So it'll pick up more green data and be able to key it out easier. Another reason is, like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of reds in our skin tone, or at least in the camera's sake. In the red channel is a lot of our skin tone. So the opposite of red, if you look at the color wheel, is the green, or the magenta, like that pinkish red is the opposite of that, is more of that green screen look, light green with lime green. And that's why it's used. It's because it's furthest away from our skin tone. Most of the time you're going to be shooting people in front of a green screen and you want to make sure that you're not keying them out at all or changing the way they look, the color of their skin, all those things. So you want to try to use a green screen because it's furthest away from that and it'll have the least amount of problems. But then you have the blue screen because that's still kind of far away from red, but it has, in case you have anything green the person's wearing, or if they have green skin alien, then you want to use a blue screen because of that. So if you look at this picture, you can see that they have the lighting coming from the right side, which is where they have the light coming in their background footage. So they took the time to check where the most light is coming from. It's coming from the right and kind of behind him. That's why it's giving him that little outlined halo. If they didn't do that, if they just lit him from the front or they lit him from the left, then it wouldn't match up, and they'd either have to flip it in post, which doesn't always work, especially if there's words in your background, because then they're backwards. Then it just wouldn't look right. So you can't always, sometimes that's a fix. Sometimes people will be able to just flip the footage horizontally and make it look like, you know, this side of the screen is coming from the left. But it doesn't always work, especially if he's looking over that way and he's looking at something that's coming from this side, then there's no reason to try to flip the background because it's just not going to look right. Why is he looking behind him if the people are coming from the outside, that kind of thing. So that's why you want to keep track, or if you're just editing it, you want to really keep a lookout on where the light is coming from so you can let them know as soon as possible, hey, you're going to have to reshoot this because it doesn't match the background that we're using unless we're going to use something else. And then again, like I said, if you have like a green alien or something, that's why you'll see on movies like Avengers or something like that, they use blue screens when they're using anything with green in it. Spider-Man, whenever they were shooting Green Goblin, they shot him on a green screen, a blue screen, and they shot Spider-Man on a green screen because he has blue on his costume. And so you really have to pay attention to that. Outfits, makeup, anything like that. You have to make sure that you're picking the right colored screen that's going to work with whatever kind of clothing and look you're going for the character and the subject. I already went over that. That's just showing whether it's whatever it's kicking out, what it's not. You want to make sure that the black parts are black, the white parts are white, and maybe some of the hair or something that's a little see-through is a little gray so that it's showing a bit of the background. So you can see like you have the original footage on the left with the green screen, the actual green screen. You make that cutout, that alpha channel or that matte, and that's going to be that white and black. And then you can, whatever's white is going to stay in the picture, and then you can just put whatever background you want, and you blend it all together and make the final key. Now, if you have movement while you are shooting on a green screen, then you are going to want trackers on your green screen to make it, or hopefully like, well, we're talking about editing. So if you are editing footage that has a green screen, you want to, hopefully the people that sent it to you put trackers on it, because that is going to make the background follow the movement of the camera when you set it up to do that. If they don't have that, it's going to be pretty impossible to figure out how much to move the background compared to the actor. And so it's going to really affect the way it looks when there's any kind of movement with the camera, because the background won't really be able to move the same way as the camera moves with the subject. So typically speaking, if a crew or some production is shooting on a green screen with movement, they're moving the camera while it's on green screen, they're going to have trackers, multiple different colors maybe. They might all be the same and the same shape, but that will have something there so that you can keep track of what's going on in the 3D space that you're going to create later. And these trackers can be different colors. They chose red for this. Red might not be the best choice because, again, red is closer to skin tones. And if you're trying to just key out all of the markers later, you're not gonna be able to just automatically key it out by clicking on one and letting all of them key out like you would the green screen. You're gonna have to make little masks and draw around them, which will just take extra time. So typically, like most, I wouldn't say most, but I would say the choices can vary depending on what color they use. But if they use something that's closer to skin tone, it won't be able to be automatically keyed out like you would a green screen, because it'll try to key out some of that skin most likely. So then you'll just have to, draw around those things. Some people use yellow, some people use really bright green. One of the problems with that is whenever you are telling the computer to track those things, it's going to be easiest for it to track if the color is different, if it's different enough against the green background to let the computer follow it. Because whenever you're having any kind of movement with the camera, especially if it was filmed at a low shutter speed or a low frame rate, you will have some motion blur, especially if there's fast movement. And whenever you have that motion blur, it's harder for the computer to keep track of that tracker, that motion tracker that you have on the wall, because it becomes more of a blur. And if it's a very similar color to the green screen, like if the green screen and then you have the markers, they're just brighter green, it's going to be a lot harder for the thing to keep track of it and to accurately reflect the movement. So typically speaking, if you're the one shooting on the green screen, you want to have something that's different enough for the computer to figure it out, but also easy enough to where it's going to be able to be keyed out later. And shooting on green screen can be very difficult for those reasons and more, because then you have to start thinking about clothing and how you don't want the clothing to match the markers or the green screen. And you have to think about lighting everything evenly, and you have to think about, all that stuff. So it does tend to get a lot more difficult when you start to add movement. And if you're doing like the characters moving around while you're having the camera move around and you're doing green screen, it's a lot it starts to get difficult. As you can see, even in this picture, like you have green all over that table, reflecting from those walls, the big, huge walls of a green screen. So that in itself is going to be difficult to key out because that table has that color in it now. And so it's going to start trying to key that table out whenever you're doing a key. So they're going to have to do more masking and more rotoscoping and things like that to get it to work properly. So if you get footage that's wasn't shot very well, or they didn't have that's why you usually want a post-production supervisor on set when you're doing things like this, because they can really help you figure out how to do it right so that it works well and is easier and less time consuming for your post-production crew. Because the more time you have for your post-production crew, if you're not the one doing it, it's just going to be more costly because they're going to be spending longer to make it work. For a blue screen, they usually do like either white spots or white crosses. And for a green screen, they'll do either yellow or red or orange or another color. Well, this is pretty blurry, but anyway. So the way you, in After Effects or in a tool like it, the way you're going to make the background kind of follow the movement of the camera is you're going to create what's called a null object. That's basically just an invisible thing that the computer sees but doesn't show up on screen. And you can basically connect it to whatever you want. And usually what you'll do is you'll connect that to the little crosses or the little motion tracking markers and tell it to follow it throughout the scene, and then let it figure out the motion where that thing moves every time the camera moves. So the camera does a slight pan to the left or right. It will follow it frame by frame, trying to keep track of exactly where it is. It's usually going to look something like this, like a little square. And the little tracking marker will be in the middle. And then basically what it's doing is it's just trying to keep that square right on top of that tracking marker every frame. So if the camera moves, it pans just from left to right. It's going to try, you're going to see the movement left to right. It's going to have like a series of little circles that it shows you where that image moves. And you don't, this is used for more things than just this, but I'm not going to get too in depth into it. Motion tracking is a thing on its own, and all these visual effects stuff is a lot more in depth than what I'm going to be getting into. I'm just going to talk about using it for the motion trackers themselves, but you can basically use these objects to track anything and then connect like a title or connect something else to it so that you have a moving title that matches a telephone pole or something, because these can track whatever you want. And you can do more than just this with these null objects, but for our sake, we're just going to talk about using them with 2D or 3D green screen tracking. So yeah. And then even then, like I was saying, like in After Effects or other applications, it's going to mostly figure it out automatically. It's mostly going to be like, okay, that thing, that marker that we're seeing right here, if we connected the null object to the one right up top, it's going to be following that. Now, if an actor gets in front of it, it's not going to know where it went. And so it won't really move it anywhere at that point, which is why you want multiple trackers so that you can have multiple null objects so that if the actor's covering one, you can still track the movement in the others. Because if you don't do that and you just have one marker, then it's not going to keep tracking the movement if an actor moves in front of it, or an actor or the camera moves to a certain angle where it's now covering the marker by an actor or by something on set. So that's why there's multiples of these. And they're usually, if you have like a whole room, like you'll see in Avengers movies and things like that, they're going to have them all over the walls, some on the ceiling, some on the floor, all over the place, just so wherever they move the camera, wherever they move the actors, they'll be able to keep track of the movement no matter what. On a smaller set, where it's just like a wall or two of green screen. You might have a couple dozen or maybe like a dozen or less. Just depends on how much movement there's going to be. And that will really determine how many you need. Where's that camera going to move at? You know, are we not going to even show that right side of it? Then we don't need any markers over there. So who cares? But if we're just showing this side or we're showing all the sides, and we need to add markers all over the place just in case. But yeah, so After Effects, if we were going to say that we were going to follow that top marker and we're moving to the left or right, or we're zooming in, it's just going to frame by frame try to keep track of where that is, where it sits. And sometimes, like I said, if you move it too fast or if something got in the way, then it's going to mess up. And that in those instances, you're going to have to kind of fix it. It's mostly going to be automatic in the where it's showing you how it moves, but sometimes it'll mess up. And that's why having those trackers is also good for the editor, so they can see, like, is it actually on point? Is it actually showing the right spot, or did it move to the left? You know, did the null marker move to the left while the actual marker on set moved to the right? Did it mess up somewhere? Then you need to fix it manually. But for the most part, doing that kind of stuff, it's going to be automatic. And then another thing you can do when you're doing these tracking things is you're going to be creating what's called like a 3D plane. 3D plane is basically just telling the computer where it's at with a X, Y, Z axis. So like where in 3-dimensional space it sits. Because if we look at this picture, it looks 2D, you know, it's all flat, but we can tell that behind this guy, that stuff's farther back. Even though it's a flat image, we can tell that, you know, those markers, that green screen, they're probably like 6 feet, 8 feet, 12 feet back. So with the computer, whenever you're doing null objects and you're doing like a 3D plane and you're telling it where these markers are or where these certain images are, if you're making a background and you're making a floor and things like that, basically all you're doing is you're telling it how far back or how close to the screen that thing is. And so then you're starting to create like 3-dimensional space where you can input CGI and you can input visual effects and things like that, where it's not going to all look like it's on top of each other on this flat 2D image that the computer sees. You're going to be telling it, yeah, computer, that part is actually farther back. If we took the camera and just walked straight, that's where that thing is. And then this item that you're seeing that looks like it's just at the bottom of the picture, it's actually closer to the camera. And you're starting to create that. Again, that's a lot more, you can go in way more in depth into that, but I'm not going to get into that too much. Making 3D spaces is very technical, very hard, and you have to study that kind of stuff to really get into it with visual effects and things like that. But basically, when you have it all and you have like the green screen in the background, you can start seeing that the background is made out of green screen, so it's not real footage. And then they're just adding that picture to match the movement. Now it looks like the background, the camera is moving. It looks like it was shot on location because the background moves when the camera moves. You know, some productions will actually shoot the background footage and match it to the movement that was shot on set. But for the most part, they'll do a bit of both, and they'll still have those trackers just to make sure that it's completely accurate, even if they do that, because there's always the possibility that something could go wrong and they accidentally took too long to do that one movement. When on set, they only did it in half a second. But when they went to on location to just shoot the background, they did it for 1 second. So now, everything's off. So that's why they'll still keep those trackers. But some of them will just have a flat image and they'll basically make that 3D, 3-dimensional plane to make it grow larger or smaller and move up and down when they make those null objects, and they motion track it to the background. And then it looks like everything was shot on location and they don't even have a green screen. Does that make sense, everybody? All right. And then the last resort, like we were talking about, is rotoscoping. Rotoscoping is extremely time consuming and extremely tedious. And it's a last resort because it's going to take a really long time, and especially to get it right. If you are if you're masking the thing, what's called masking, which is like the old way of doing it before they had those tools like rotobrush, which we'll get into in a minute. But masking is taking that pen tool like I did earlier and drawing an outline around your subject as close as you can without cutting anything off. Some will go like a tiny bit away from them. If you're doing it professionally, you want to try to match it pretty much exactly, like exactly around them. Some of them, if you're doing it just for like a YouTube video or something like that, they will do what we see in this picture where it's not exact. There's a little bit of space in between. And that's because they're going to soften the background and they're going to soften it up a bit just to make it a little bit more blurry and less ugly. And then when they put it on a new background, it won't really be noticeable. But if you're doing it for a feature film that you're going to show in theaters or something like that, you're going to have to either get somebody or do it yourself to rotoscope the whole thing if your keying isn't working and your green screen's not working for whatever reason. And then you're just going to make these little points and draw an outline all the way around your subject, keeping every single piece in that you need to keep in and cutting out everything that doesn't belong. And then you're going to do that for the next frame. You're going to go to the next frame and you're going to start moving these key points. Maybe the guy moved his shoulder just a tiny bit. Well, now we need to move these points to make sure that they don't cut off his shoulder. Okay, now maybe the next frame, he's moving his head a tiny bit to the side. You'd be surprised how much people move around when they're talking. Even when it seems like they're sitting still or they're standing still, they're moving around. And when you start rotoscoping, you'll notice this, and you'll have to start readjusting this mask over and over and over again for every frame. And depending on how much it was shot, like if it was shot 60 frames a second, or if it's a 30-second frame, 30 frames a second video, then that's going to be 30 times you have to do that. You have to go through it every frame, adjusting the outline over and over again. Every frame, 30 times for every second of video. So if it's like if it's only a 1 minute video, that's still like 180 times you have to do it. And that's just for like, oh, sorry, did I say 1 second or 1 minute? Yeah, 1 minute video. That's going to be like 180 times that you have to go through and do that. So now you just keep adding that up. It's a feature length film. You know, that's a huge amount of work that you have to do. You're going to have to go through every frame. It's going to get tedious. It's going to get boring, and it's going to get annoying because you have to be so precise. And so it is, you know, one of the biggest drags of everybody, all of post-production people, if they have to rotoscope, it's like the worst thing that they have to do because it's just so boring and it takes forever and it requires precision. So you have to pay attention with every single thing you do. And it's just very long, tedious process. But essentially it'll do the same thing as you would get with a green screen. It'll cut out the subject, and with each movement they make, they'll be cut out. So then you can put them into whatever background you'd like. And another reason you might use rotoscoping is if you don't use green screen footage, but you still want to cut out part of the image or you want to cut out the subject. Rotoscoping's the only way you can really do that because the background won't be one color where you can just tell the computer, kick out this color and we're good. It'll be something on set, on location. So if somebody's in a city and you can't show that city, but you want to get a shot of something or whatever, for whatever reason, or you want to use something that you need to cut out one part of it from, they'll have to use rotoscoping and cut around that subject, take them out of that background and put them into somewhere else. So if you don't have a green screen or you're not using a green screen, this is an alternative to that, but it's just going to take way longer to do. So just keep that in mind. This kind of shows a really sped up process of doing it for 1 frame or 2 frames, where a lot of people, if they're doing it, especially professionally, they'll cut subjects up into different pieces pretty much, where it'll be like the head. On this one, they have the dog, they have just ones for the ears. That way it's a bit easier than trying to outline the entire subject each frame, where you're like going through the entire video and you're making one for her head, and then you're making one for her shoulder, and then you're making one for her arm, and you go through and do it over and over again so that you can just keep track of one piece of the body. So if there's any movement in it, it's a lot easier to do. And it's usually going to be different colors so that you can really keep track of which rotoscope piece this is. So, you know, and then you can see like, okay, that's covering his snout, that's covering his head, that's covering his ears. And it'll make it easier to cut out the subject than trying to outline both of them every single time. But even still, it's a lot of work. Then you have the Rotobrush tool, which is like this. This is it makes it a bit easier. It's a more of a automated version of this. Basically, the Rotobrush, you're going to paint around what you want to capture, what you want to rotoscope out. This is a bit easier for it because it's just a round object, a ball. I think this is in a video game actually. But they're saying this is the subject I want to key out, and then the computer's trying to figure out where those edges are. And I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it's basically the computer just looking at it and going, okay, well, these pixels look a lot like this, so I think this is the edge. And then it'll try to outline the item that you just chose, or the person, or whatever you chose to outline. And it uses machine learning to try to figure it out. And it works, but sometimes, you know, it's not exact, especially when you have things like hair and things like that, where it's a little bit harder to get a clean rotoscope on. But then it has those tools where if it didn't capture the exact thing you want, you can use this negative thing where you're telling it like not to include this piece, and then it'll cut that out. So if you're only wanting to keep that dark black shadow in and not the whatever the other side is, then you're going to use the negative tool to say, no, I don't want this part. And then it's going to try to outline again, and you'll keep going over and over through it to try to capture as close to the outline as possible. And you'll use the other tool, the add tool, to just basically say, I want to keep this part in, and it'll try to readjust that. So it is a lot faster than rotoscope masking, which is, you know, typing it in or outlining it yourself. And it typically can get a lot closer than humans can, just because it has more precision with the pixels. It looks exactly at each pixel and sees a difference in color and the changes that happen, and then tries to outline it as close as possible. But it still takes a long time, like Arden was saying earlier. Like, it still takes a really long time, even with it being automated like this, because you still have to go through frame by frame and check and make sure it's keeping it in. And if there's any blurry footage, or there's a lot of movement, or there's colors in the background that match this car, then it, you know, it'll mess up this automated system and it'll get it out of whack. Or if there's hair and there's transparency and it's a lot of hair, or, you know, anything that's transparent and hard to key around, it'll have a lot of trouble figuring out where those edges are and what it should cut out, what it should keep in. So even with a tool like this, you still want to try to use it as a last resort, but it does tend to make that last resort a bit faster. And then when you're using the Rotobrush tool, you can also switch it to a, basically it'll show you what it's going to kick out and what it's keeping in. So it'll make what it's going to kick out red, and what it's keeping in not red. And then or you can also change it to that same thing that we saw earlier, where it's the white and the black, the matte. where it looks like this to see like what it's going to keep and what it's going to kick out. But it's just another version of that pretty much to show you what's going to be transparent, what's going to be opaque. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything to add about green screen, blue screen, keying?
Yeah, I think about the green screen, when you're actually taking the background, right, the frame, the motion, the camera movement needs to match with what you're doing on the green screen. So if the camera is panning to the left or panning to the right, it has to exactly be the same. Otherwise, it's not going to work, right? Because for those motion track marks to work, you have to have that angle and the position and whatnot to be able to do that. And also, I think these days what I have read is that using a lot of
Well, you're kind of cutting out.
Yeah. Is it clear now?
Yeah, it's clear.
Hello?
Yeah, it's clear now.
I've been having some trouble with my Wi-Fi for some reason. I don't know. Load is kind of crazy, I think. But what I was mentioning was that there's LCD panel walls, which they are using, which is like a three-dimensional, no, not three-dimensional, but they'll be on the three sides. So it'll be pretty much what you would see on real time.
Oh, like the virtual
background of the
production.
panel wall. Yeah, right. And the resolution is pretty high, the 4K resolution. So you can pretty much project on the back, and the movement of the the subjects in the front is kind of matched to that thing. But still, I think you need to also have the matching done on the background with subject. But they seem to be pretty good, actually, very effective. You can get the very high resolution, and matching is not a issue. So matching is the issue in the sense like you can control it much better then and there, instead of doing a green screen and then keying it out and whatnot.
Right.
So that seems to be becoming popular. A lot of studios are adopting to that thing. And for the rotoscoping, what for like actresses, right? You may have some long hair, and then the wind kind of blowing. That makes it really difficult for it to work with, because you have so much stuff to go on with. And for rotoscoping, I think as long as as you had mentioned it, that the movement from frame to frame, incremental movement is not too much. You can go from one location to another location and slowly, frame by frame, do the rotoscoping. But if the movement is changing, the frame is changing, then you have to start all over again. So you can do the pen tool to get the edge, and a lot of times they have like a good algorithms which they run, which basically takes the proximity of the subject and cut out the silhouette or the background of it, just the edges of that subject. And then it moves with the subject, in the direction it's going. As long as there's not too much change, and work with that. The moment you change, too much motion into the subject, then you have to start all over again. Then that algorithm kind of breaks. It goes so far the subject, and cleaning it out and putting the new background. But after a while, after that, I think you have to restart all over again. And it's not even though you can do the incremental from position A to position B, even though their movement is not as much, but you still have to go individually frame wise and clean it up. So that also is pretty tedious, as you know.
Yeah, like making sure nothing is sticking out or it's like still outlining the subject correctly.
Right. So on green screen, it's always tough to light the green screen because you can light the green screen from, you can put the light from the top, bottom, left and right, but you still have a spot in the middle which the light would gradiently fall from all different sides. So it may be bright on the sides, but so that's always a challenge, trying to maintain the truly well lit green screen. But with the panels, it's that thing is gone because right now you have pretty much whatever 4K quality you have on the panel, that's how it's going to show up. So mostly when they do a car, people characters traveling the car, they will have the background or the sideways, when they put the camera in. They would have like a rear projection, rear view projection kind of thing. They used to use the projectors and basically put it on the screen. So that with that, it appears the car is moving, but it's actually car is in the studio with the green screen in the back, right? Or maybe the projection in the back. So for that also, I think this come out pretty handy, and you don't have to worry about what you're projecting, but it's just a 4K kind of screen resolution, which is exactly the resolution you would have for the subjects in the foreground. So everything gels pretty good. So yeah, the technology is kind of really assisting in a lot of ways in which the production, post-production is getting really fancy and sophisticated, and easier to do.
Yeah, especially with the more stuff that keeps coming out, and then when it gets more wide stream, it gets cheaper, and like independent filmmakers can start using it. Right now, the virtual production stuff, it's somewhat used on independent films, but it is more expensive, of course, because there's only certain studios doing it right now because it's still pretty new. So it is more used on the higher end stuff still, but it is like becoming more popular finally, where it's starting to catch on, where you can see
like Game of Thrones had a lot of outdoor green screens, which was kind of surprising. When I was looking at some of their reports, they were going in the middle of the outside area, and then doing green screen, and then replacing the green screen with locations in Spain or Romania and whatnot,
right?
So that also, I think, is becoming getting that tracking motion. Yeah, a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. That is also something to think about, everybody, when you are doing green screen at all in your own footage, is you always want something for the actors to interact with. Like, you could not have this green screen thing you're going to key out, and you could just put a CGI character there, but then they're not really interacting with anything. So it's a lot harder for them to, first of all, take it like, act like there's something there, but also their movements, their hand, where they rest their hand, it's not going to feel as natural because there's nothing for them to interact with. Then you'll also see green screens used to have extra like background sets and stuff like that. Like, they'll add background into the rest of it. So, but they still have a lot of stuff for the actors to actually interact with, where they're just extending the background and making more buildings or making more mountains to make it look like a city. And so they just have like these little green screen areas around what they're going to actually shoot on location. So this part in the middle, in the back right there, right above the boat, way far back, that little building part is the actual set. The rest of it is stuff that they're going to replace with, you know, the city or the mountains and whatever location they're at. So they are having that green screen cover that area so that they can key out what they don't want, keeping those real elements in and replacing it with whatever background or animated thing or CGI that they want. So if you are doing green screen on set, you still want to try to give the actors or the characters or the crew even just stuff to see like where things are going to be, what it's going to maybe look like or feel like around that area, even if it's all green screen. You want to give them something to interact with. And then there's something called wire removal. And that's basically you're just going to mask around these wires, make a little thing to basically key out the wires whenever people are hanging. So it looks like they are floating in the air, falling from the sky, being used with, you know, someone's using telekinesis on them, or, you know, the force or something like that, whatever you're doing, a jetpack, you know, making a huge jump, jumping on a trampoline, something like that, whatever they're doing, they're usually on these wires for safety reasons. And so the editor or the visual effects editor will be taking these wires off of them and doing the green screen as well. If it's not shot in front of a green screen, hopefully those wires were also, if they were shot on location, hopefully that the people who shot it, if you shot it, make sure that you get what's called a clean plate, which is basically just shooting the background in the exact way you're going to shoot the actual footage, and then copying that when you're shooting the actor with the wires, because then they can just cut out those wires and the background will just be there. They'll just replace whatever they cut out with the footage you already shot where they're not actually there. If that isn't the case, they have to cut out the wires and then you have to replace it with the background. And that's a little harder because you have to try to match the pixels, and basically you're painting over it to make it look like the background instead. So it does take more time and it is a bit harder to do. But if you're able to, and it's easy enough, you want to try to just get a clean slate of that, a clean plate where you are recording just the background without the actors, without the wires. And then you bring the actors in and the wires and you record it again in the exact same way so that you can easily just cut out whatever you want and it's replaced with the one where you didn't have the actors in it. All right, moving on from that, we're going to talk about crowdfunding. This comes from Film Courage, letter A in the syllabus. You guys want to look at all of their tips and everything. They talk about it all. And letter A, which is crowdfunding for filmmakers, 6 big mistakes. So one of them, he says, don't just randomly go posting to different influencers and publications to try to get them to post about your campaign, because you want to set yourself apart and really know if the audience of these publications or these influencers or the audience of these influencers are really going to be interested in your project, because otherwise you're just another filmmaker that's looking for funding. So you want to try to cater it more towards what kind of audience you're going for, what your target audience is whenever you have a film or an idea. If you're making a sci-fi show, then you don't just want to say, hey, makeup artist, influencer, or just like person who does makeup, I'm going to, get you to talk about my film. Here's so-and-so amount of money. So you have 1 million followers, spread the word. They might do it, but like their audience is just people that are looking for makeup tutorials or something like that. So they're not going to be as interested in some sci-fi movie from some person they don't know. So there's really no point in just posting it to them or getting them to do it. And he was saying that, a lot of people, when they first start out trying to do crowdfunding and they're trying to launch their campaign and they try to spread it as far and wide as possible, which is good, but you don't really want to be spending money and just spending all that time posting it to people who aren't going to do anything with your thing. They're not going to be paying any attention to it. They're not going to care about it because they're not your target audience. So you really want to figure out your target audience, who they might be, and then go to some influencers that talk about movies that are sci-fis or, sci-fi video games, or they make props for sci-fi movies and they have a big following. Those are the kinds of people that you want to try to get to talk about your film, because their audience will be more inclined to check it out and be interested in it. So you really want to cater it to that. And same thing with publications. Some are for, different publications, different news or news sources or articles or whatever are for different types of target audiences. Some are for females, some are for males, some are for older people, some are for younger people, some are for kids, some are for teenagers, adults. What is your target audience? You really need to figure that out, especially if you're trying to do any kind of marketing. And this kind of falls into marketing, but it also falls into trying to gain financing. So we're talking about it in this semester, but crowdfunding, it's a mixture of trying to get financing, but it's also a mixture of like marketing and being able to market this to people and figure all these things out that you need to really make your film take off, or your campaign anyway. Another thing you want to think about is don't have the boring standard, what he calls standard definition perks or incentives. You want to think of unique experiences that they wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. He says like the standard ones you need are like, associate producer credit. That's starting to be a lot more standard now because every single film is doing it. If you give me this amount of money, I'll put you in the credits as an associate producer. I'll give you special thanks credit, whatever. So that's not as important as it used to be. Or, maybe executive producer credit. If they give like a really large amount of the campaign, then you could give them an executive producer credit. But even then, that's more of like a standard kind that you could get at any other film you do. So it's not really as unique or as individualized as some other things could be that you could come up with. And more other things that you might have that are more standard is like showing your film to them, giving them early access to any information. So, hey guys, we just signed this person, or we've raised this much, or we're going to film here. This is the location. We had this director sign on. Whatever kind of things that happen with your film, giving them the first information, whoever's contributing to your film, that's pretty standard. But you also want to have more unique perks, like maybe they could have a speaking role on your project if they give a certain amount, like a really large amount, or like one of the larger contribution amounts that you do on your campaign anyway. So maybe if they choose to, they can come to set a day and then they can have a speaking role, one line maybe as an extra that has one speaking role, or they can just come on set and they can just be there on set and just, see how it's done, what you do and how you guys are doing it. Maybe they could write a few lines for one of the characters, or maybe they could write part of a scene or a whole scene. Depends on what you're trying to do, what you're willing to allow to have like a little bit of a creativity given by somebody else. But you really want to give those different kinds of unique experiences that can't really happen anywhere else. So like a producer credit, an associate producer credit is pretty cool, but actually being able to come on set, some people are really interested in that, especially depending on what kind of production you're doing. And, they've never seen a sci-fi film and how it's made. So they really want to come on set and look at it and see all the props and all the things getting set up and how many people are there working and all those things that they can't really get anywhere else. So that might interest them a lot more than just, you know, having their name in the credits, which maybe that'll interest a lot of people, but some people, they want more like tangible things. And so that's something easy that you can usually give on like a crowdfunding campaign where you're not really paying for anything, because typically speaking, most of those are going to say, if you provide your own accommodations and you provide your own travel, you can do this and this. You can have a speaking role, you can come on set, but you have to, you know, you have to get yourself here and you have to stay in a hotel and pay for yourself. And that way you're not paying for them, but they are paying you to come on set and just be there, which is an experience that maybe they really want. Or you might say like, they might get to meet you, they might get to have dinner with you, they might have a personal one-on-one call where they can throw you some ideas that they have, or you can discuss their idea for their project. Or maybe you'll name a character after them in the film, and you'll change one of the names of the characters to be their name or whatever name they choose. Those kinds of things are a lot more involving. And so he calls them like high definition or 3D definition perks, because they're just a bit like a step up. He's talking about like TV standards, you know, like standard definition. It's there, you can see the stuff, but it's not going to look as good as high definition. And then 3D, where you can see it really pop out, where it's something a little bit more interesting. And if it was made specifically for that, then it's, you know, really unique, or at least it used to be before everyone started being 3D. But that's his point. It's like he's just come up with things where they won't be able to get those perks somewhere else, or it'll be like an experience. It'll be a tangible thing, and they can decide if they want to do it or not. Maybe they don't want their name in the project, but they're going to do that perk because they want to name a character still. They just don't want to give out their name, or, you know, anything like that. So whatever you're able to think of and uniquely give them, you want to try to do that, just so that your project stands out. The perks are unique, and it excites some people that really want to know this stuff, really want to do this stuff, but have never been able to, or don't really know where to look to get that kind of view on it. Also, you don't want to be lazy with the perks. You want to put in the time and the creativity to have some good and unique and personalized ones. So like the ones we were talking about, it's going to take a lot of time, especially if you're doing like one-on-one calls, or if you're telling them you'll do a dinner and they actually do want to come out and have dinner with you and talk about the project or talk about their project. It's going to take a lot of time, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe more. And it's going to take time to think of all this stuff, but you really want to take the time and just work it out and figure out these things to make it unique and make it cool and creative. Don't be lazy. Don't be quick with all of these things, because there's so many out there now. There's so much competition with Kickstarter and Indiegogo and various websites that do crowdfunding, but also just the crowdfunding projects, how many filmmakers are trying to get their projects made. And so there's constantly campaigns for new films. And if you just go on any of those sites and you look up film and you see which ones are active, you'll find plenty. And so you really want to try to set yourself apart and be unique as much as you can. And you have to put in the effort. Another thing is that these things are going to take a long time. It's not going to be something really quick and easy. You don't just post it, say, hey, I need $50,000 for this thing. And then you just leave it alone. And all of a sudden you look back at it in a month and you got $50,000. You have to be a lot more active in it. And you have to be a lot more engaging and interactive with your community of people that are trying to get in, and spreading the word as much as you can to the right people, doing your research to try to figure out where to try to get your audiences from and who might have those audiences already, and trying to reach out to them and email them and say, hey, can you do this? And can I post this? And all this stuff is going to take a long time. So don't just think that crowdfunding is going to be easy and simple and quick, because it's basically like a full-time job. It's like another full-time job that you have to spend 6 months to a year on, because you really want to have months before you even do it, trying to figure out how you're going to do it, what you're going to do, and have a plan, a strategic plan for how you're going to do this campaign. You don't want to try to figure out these things while you're doing it, because the campaigns themselves are usually only like 30 days to 90 days. So you really want to try to figure out this stuff beforehand. And then when you're in the campaign, you already have a plan and you know what you're going to do, and you're going to launch these new cool things later in the campaign to keep people engaged, keep people coming back to it, or just spreading the word to, hey, they have this new perk available, you know, and you might want to go donate to them because, or not donate, but contribute to them because they're doing something really cool. And, you know, you'll have a constant engagement. Because the main problem with people when they're doing campaigns, he says, is like they post, they are active for the first 3 to 4 days, posting and commenting and engaging with the people who are contributing. And then they're just silent and they just feel like, oh, we did pretty good. We got this amount of money so far, so we'll just leave it, let it keep growing. But then there's nothing new in that campaign. And so it's just kind of dead. And so nobody just goes to it and gives all their money away because there's nothing going on for that project for the last 20 days, even though the first 5 days had a lot of stuff going on. The next 20, they didn't do anything. So now it's just kind of, you know, it's just kind of a ghost town. And so because of that, there's not really any new engagement. There's not really new excitement. And it's just kind of lulled, and you might not reach your goal by the end. So another thing he says to do is what's called a soft launch. So when you're running your campaign and you have it all ready, you have everything set up, and you're getting ready to post it, you're doing a soft launch first, where you're not spreading the word to the public first. Before posting to the public, you're going to share your crowdfunding campaign with your friends and your family and the people that are closest to you. So the soft launch, the people that are most likely to begin giving you the money for this project. You want there to be momentum for your campaign. So the more funds you're able to secure early in the first 3 to 5 days, the better chance you're going to have to get the full amount. So you want to try to get your friends and family involved before you actually like do the official launch, where you're doing it all over your social media, where you're posting all over the place and trying to get people involved that don't know you. You first want to do the soft launch and just give it to your closest friends, your closest family members, and see if they'll invest before you even begin like the to just like spreading the word to other people. Because if they see that there's already some of that money's already been given, that contributions are already there, they're more likely to give in some of their own money because, oh, like this thing's already being successful and they've only been out for 2 days. Wow. You know, instead of it just being like there's $0 contributed because they didn't even try with their family and friends first. So he says to do a soft launch first, just to build that momentum. And that way, when you post to the public, there's already stuff there. There's already some money donated or contributed to you. Like I already said earlier, he also says, have a strategy, plan out how you'll keep people interested in the campaign. Some people release new perks at certain time integrals. And so they might be like certain perks that you might give to different people are for different things. I mean, you might just have timed ones where after 10 days you release a new perk or 2 new perks or something like that, to where it might excite more people to come in and, oh, those perks are really cool, I want to take part in that. And that stuff you have to really pre-plan before you start doing your campaign. You really want to pre-plan that stuff and figure it out, so that when you are when you are in the middle of your campaign, you know that in 5 days I'm going to launch this new perk, and that will hopefully build a little more excitement for people to come back or to spread the word that, hey, there's another cool thing now he's offering or she's offering this reward to donate. So come back and donate, or get new people to donate. Because usually in these things, they are some of the higher end contribution levels. Like they have a tiered system. Usually the higher end, like making somebody an executive producer, if they give $2,500 or something like that, usually you have a certain limit to that. So you say like 4, I'll do that 4 times. And if 4 people give it to you, that perk gets crossed out because you don't give any more to that. And so sometimes in these campaigns, some of the cooler perks will get taken away and they'll get brought out and they'll be crossed out to where nobody can get those anymore. And all that's left is like the lower end or the super high end where people are less likely to get. So having a new perk come in that has like a different amount of money might get some more people to back you and to give you some of their money for that perk. So that's one way to keep people interested. There's also update videos or update comments, constantly updating the people on what's going on, what you're working on, and how the campaign is doing and what you need next. And then some people have certain surprise recordings when there's like certain milestones met. So like at 50% funded, you already have the idea to launch this surprise video, or something interesting to keep people engaged when those milestones are met. And one of it might be just thanking everybody that's donated so far, where you're thanking every single person by name, even though it's going to take a crap ton of time. Those people that donated will appreciate it probably, and then more people might be interested in donating because they like what you did for the previous donators or contributors. So just having ideas for things and having a strategy for how you're going to keep people engaged and keep people coming back or keep people spreading the word is something you definitely want to do when you're running one of these. Because like I said, people will start getting bored with the thing if it's 30 days long, 90 days long, and there's no new information, there's no new posts since the first 10 days. Like you got to keep people engaged to be able to reach these goals for the most part. You can even tell people that you have stuff, releasing in, certain amount of time. If you have like timed things that are coming out every 5 days, you can let your contributors know, your backers know, or just people that maybe they didn't give you anything, but they saw your post that's saying like, hey guys, in 5 days, we're going to have an update, or we're going to have this, or we're going to do a funny video, or I don't know, whatever. And that will keep people engaged a bit more and keep people coming back to it and keep reminding them of this thing going on. So if they did contribute, another problem that people usually have that I hear about is people will donate or they'll contribute to the project and they'll say like maybe they give $100, but then they forget about it because there's like nothing new to keep them reminded about it, to spread the word to their friends and family. Like, oh yeah, hey guys, I posted this. I think you might be interested in this, best friend, because we like the same stuff. And so then their best friend might see it and like it and want to contribute. But what happens is they donate it and then they kind of forget about it. And then they're not going to mention it to their friend. But if they're seeing a new video or a new update or a post about it, oh yeah, I forgot about that thing. And then, maybe that'll give them, it'll remind them about the project, and then they have a better chance of sharing it with their friend that they think might like it. If they talk to their friend, oh yeah, hey, this project that, I donated to, they're doing something cool and I think you might like it. It's more likely that's going to happen if you keep stuff coming up, not annoyingly where it's like spam, where it's like every day you're posting stuff and it's right in their face, but just every so often trying to keep people coming back and engaged and reminded about this thing and updated on what's happening so they're more likely to spread the word. You also don't want to set too high of a goal. You want to, he says, you want to come up with how much your family and friends may be able to get you and multiply that by like 3 or 3.5. because around 30% of your funding is probably going to come from your friends and your family that's going to be most interested to see you succeed. And so they'll be the ones to give you like 30% of that money, that funding. And after that, it's going to be people that you don't really know or that don't know you as well. But you really want to start out your campaign goal by thinking like, how much can I realistically get on this? You know, you don't want to try to go too high because it's not a good look if you fail the campaign, and it's also just a lot harder to get people engaged. More people are willing to give if they feel like you're going to make your goal than if they feel like you're going for too much and you only have 2% of your goal. Like, then you're not going to make it to 100%. But if you're at 60% and you still have 15 days, then it's more likely that you might get there. So now they're more enticed to go ahead and give you some of that funding to help boost it up to that percentage, because they feel like, okay, you might actually make it to your goal. Let me help out. If you are planning to crowdfund, you want to start building your audience and social media now. So if you're planning to do it in like 3 to 6 months, maybe a year, you want to start really like building your social media audience, getting fans. Maybe you want to do Twitter and tweet, post, like, comment, retweet, share, get involved on YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these different social media platforms to try to build an audience, get people interested in you and what you're doing or your company. And that way, when you are ready to launch your campaign, you have a bigger following and more of a chance to get people involved and get people to be inclined to contribute to your project. If you don't have anybody that you're never on social media, you don't even use it, it's going to be a lot harder, maybe even impossible for you to get any kind of successful campaign going on one of these crowdfunding platforms. You really need to be kind of used to like how to engage with an audience, how to engage online with people to be able to run a successful crowdfunding campaign. So if you're not good at that, you might want to consider trying to get somebody that knows how to do that a lot better, or who has successfully done their own crowdfunding campaigns, and maybe tell them that you'll give them a certain percentage of the profit if you reach the 100% goal. And then they're more inclined to try to get that goal going. So if you're not good at all that, you can also try to work with other people that are good at it to try to get a successful campaign going. But if you're going to do it yourself, you really want to try to get that audience built much before you're trying to actually launch your campaign for the crowdfunding thing. And that is just getting active in those communities, Reddit, whatever social media platforms you're going to use. Just commenting, liking, retweeting people's stuff, and then they're more likely to retweet your stuff. Subscribing to people on YouTube and commenting on their stuff will get more people to go to your stuff. And if you build an audience that way, you'll already have some fans, and they're going to be more likely to give you to contribute to your project, to your campaign, than if they don't know you at all and you're just starting and you're already asking for money right off the bat. Now, some of this stuff is from Film Courage again, but it's one of their other videos. This is from letter B, which is before you launch a crowdfunding campaign. So you have to take into account that even if you have a large social media following, as in this picture, you can see about 90% to 99% are most likely not going to give you anything. They're not going to contribute to your campaign or do anything like that. 90% of people on social media are just lurkers. They're just people who look at the stuff, they watch you, they might follow you, but they don't really interact. They don't comment. Maybe they give you a few likes here and there, but they're not really as involved as some of the other followers that you have. 9%, they might be the ones who sometimes comment, sometimes share your video or share your retweet your tweet, but they're not really the ones who are going to be heavily involved in something like maybe a crowdfunding campaign. And then you have about 1%, which are just the people who are very much a fan of yours. They follow what you do. Maybe they comment a lot, they share your stuff, and they'd be really interested in helping you out and making you succeed. It might be people you know really well, or it might be people that are just fans of yours that have come to like you over the content that you made or the interactions that you've had with them online. And that 1% is the people who are most likely going to be involved with your campaign. And the 9%, some of them might, contribute to the campaign. They might give some of the, they might contribute to it and do one of the tiers of donation or whatever and get a perk. But the 1% are going to be those people who also take it upon themselves to try to share that information with others, to try to get others to join the campaign. You try to get others to look at your content and maybe contribute to your project so that you can have a successful campaign. So even if you have 1 million people following you on YouTube or 1 million people following you on Facebook and liking your stuff, 90% of those people aren't going to do anything. They're not going to follow you. They're not going to look at any links you send them, retweet, whatever. They're just lurkers. They just look at your content and that's it. And within that 90%, it could be a range of how often they actually come to your stuff and look at it or not. If you look at people on YouTube, you'll see that some people have 1 million subscribers, but their videos might get 5,000 to 10,000 views. And so that's because most of the people subscribe, but they're not actually viewing their content. And then you'll see the likes and dislikes are much, much less, which would go into that 9% people. And then you'll see the people commenting on every single video and whatever, that would be their 1% followers. So depending on how active and engaged your community is also a factor. You could have 5,000 followers and 2,500 people comment, like it, view every video, whatever else. Then you have a very active community. Your engagement is very high. But if you have a very large number of people that quote unquote follow you, but none of them are actually viewing your stuff or liking or commenting on your stuff, then you have a very low or average following or so engagement. You have a very low or average engagement. And so depending on that, you'll really start to see what can I realistically set my goal at? What can I realistically get from a crowdfunding campaign if I am to do it? Another thing to consider with crowdfunding is that you don't just want to think about it as raising funds or I got to get this amount of money, but you want to also think about creating an audience and widening your fan base and your following. Some people might not know who you are, but if you have a semi-successful campaign, maybe you've reached 50% of your goal and you start to get on the front page of Indiegogo or Kickstarter or whatever, because you have a lot of engagement going on in your first few days, they're more likely to try to help you get your goal completely funded. If that happens, you might have people that have never heard about you or just come to the Kickstarter website, see your post and go on it, and maybe you've got a new fan now. So another way to think about it is just creating an audience and widening your fan base, because Some people will post even though they know that they're not going to actually get the funding. They don't actually believe that they're going to get the goal that they're putting out there. They really just want to get more notice and more people and build that fan base and figure out who their target audience is, who's liking it, who's commenting it, who is giving money for it. And that will help them do some research for free, just like giving a bunch of their time, but it'll help them get a better idea of who is this going to be for. So some people don't even do it for the money. They just do it for that kind of thing, for the audience, figuring out their fan base and their target market. Another thing to think of it as is it can be advertising for your project if it's successful. Like, oh, why do people see this project and contribute to it? What's so special about it? Let me check it out. And then you'll have more people more likely to spread the word, and that kind of advertising can really help when you actually do release your film. So if you are successful with your project, your goal is met, you're more likely to get people to be interested in it. And investors even would be more interested in, why are there so many people that are giving their money to this project? And so the investor might be more interested in helping you out further. Because typically when you're talking about funding, you're not just going to be going for a crowdfunding site and getting all of your funding from it. Sometimes you might, but sometimes you're usually just getting part of your budget from this. So it actually does help with other forms of financing, because your investor will see that there are people interested in this. So it's more likely that they might make their money back. And so they'll be more willing to give you their part of the funding. You want to make sure you do your research. You check out the other film campaigns that were successful. Check out the ones that failed. Why were those ones successful? Why did the other ones fail? And you can really narrow it down in things like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. You can narrow it down by film, by genre, when it was released, if it was successful or not. And if they ended up making their goal, if it's still active now. There's a lot of things you can do to research how other people have done it and what worked and what didn't. And then you can start seeing those patterns of why something might have worked and why it didn't. You can see if, somebody had backed a bunch of other projects on Kickstarter, or if this was their first project that they launched on Kickstarter, their first campaign, or if this is their 10th campaign. Because if it's their 10th campaign, then it's like, oh, well, people already know them. They already know their projects because they've launched on here so many times. And, maybe a few of their other ones were successful. So now they already built that audience already that contributes to Kickstarter all the time. But if you look at somebody that has their first run and they're successful, you can see, okay, well, they're successful, which means that they just did it through word of mouth, through people they knew, through advertising online, social media, and they were successful. So how did they do it? You can look up that kind of stuff. You can look up how engaging they were, how active they were, how much they posted and updated people on things, if they added any perks, what kind of perks they had, what were the rewards for those tiers, how much were they asking for. All of those things can come into play, and you can see how their video was set up and how they talked about their project and how they gained that excitement and kept it going until they got their goal, or why they didn't get their goal, why it didn't work. And you can check out the differences and compare. So you really want to narrow it down and do your research and look at things that are similar to what you're doing, what you're going for, and see what works and what doesn't. And you're going to have to do this research quite a bit for 2 to 3 months, 4 months before you actually begin planning out your own. Because you really want to nail down these things before. You don't want to put in all this time and effort just to have it fail. So as much as you can, you want to try to get an upper hand on all these things to have a better understanding of why it might work. Because even if you understand everything and you know why it works, why it doesn't, that doesn't mean yours will be successful, but it does give you a better chance at coming up with a plan that will be. So researching everything is really important. And you want, maybe you can ask people you know, you can ask, or beyond who you know, if they've ever crowdfunded for film and if they have any info or tips. So if anyone you know has done it and maybe they were successful or maybe they failed, they'll probably have some information on what works, what doesn't, or or like how long it takes and things like that, that you can really learn from by asking them and figuring out before you just begin your own. So that is also something to look into. Another thing you want to do is make sure you don't oversell it. Make sure you're not promising the world when you can't give it. Be honest, sell what you have, but try to sell it as best as you can. So, you know, we only have 20,000, but then just try to upsell what you are able to do. Don't oversell it where it's unrealistic and saying, yeah, we're going to get Tom Cruise in this thing and we're going to shoot in 9 different countries and all of this stuff, when you're, you know, most likely you're not going to be able to get that stuff. So don't try to lie and oversell things that you're not going to be able to do. It's just going to anger all the people who gave you money, or it's just going to make people not give you money because they think you're full of crap, which you most likely are. So you really want to be honest in these things and just tell them straight up what's going on, but also be as sell it up as best you can with what you have available and what it actually is. Like I said, it's going to be like a full-time job, so don't think it's going to be easy. You're going to be commenting and liking and spreading the word, building graphics and assets for like pictures and different things for your project to keep engagement going and keep interest in it, and a lot more. So it's like a full-time job. It's very time consuming, and you don't just want to think of it in a way that's going to undermine the whole thing by just thinking it's going to be easy, because it's not. You really want to think about how much time you're able to put into it and how much you can actually do with it. You also want to consider the cost of the perks that you give out. So some people, they'll just give out a perk that sounds really cool, like a t-shirt or like something very, like a behind the scenes booklet of all the pictures of behind the scenes, and we'll set it up to make it look like a book. That stuff's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time. So you really want to think about that before you try to give it out as a perk. So some of the perks you want to think about, you should try to consider things like how long it's going to take to make that stuff or to create it, how expensive it's going to be, if it's going to cost any money to do that out of your pocket, that's going to basically come out of your funding, and how difficult it will be to do. You want something that's a little more simple, cheap, or doesn't cost anything for you, and that has value for the fans. So you still want to make sure it has value for the people that are contributing, because those perks are one of the main things that drive people to go a tier up or a tier down when they're contributing. But you also want to make sure that it's not going to take away all that funding that you just got by making it something that's really difficult, which is why you'll see people talking about having, like, you know, you can come have dinner with us, you can come on set, you can have a speaking role, you can be an extra in the background, but you have to pay for room and you have to pay for food. And that way, those costs don't fall on the campaign runner. So if you're running the campaign, you don't have to pay for that stuff, but you're offering it as a perk to allow them on the set, but they have to pay their way to get there. And that way it's not going to cost you anything, and it's going to be something of value to a fan. Or, you know, like a Zoom call with them where they're discussing their script. That's going to be time, but it's not going to be like any money for you. So that's another thing you might want to think about, stuff like that. Why are they contributing to you? You know, they must like you to some extent, or appreciate the work you've done, or like what you're doing, or your idea, and they might want to discuss it more with you. And so those kinds of perks will have value to some people who really want to talk more in depth with you about it, want to really dig in your head about how you came to this idea, what you're planning to do with it, whatever else, all these questions that come up whenever somebody's really interested in something. So those kinds of perks are something to think about when you're talking about giving people things. Giving away things like free DVDs and Blu-rays happens, but again, that's going to be a cost of some sort. So always keep that final value in mind of how much you're going to get from the contribution, how much you're going to spend time and money on a perk, and figure out the final value of what that's going to be after it's all said and done. These next ones come from C, how to make a movie crowdfunding lessons learned with Kickstarter. So again, it's from Film Courage, but different people. You want to be creative with your pitch video. So the first thing that people see when they go to the Kickstarter campaigns is going to be the video that talks about the project, talks about why you should contribute to their campaign, and who they are. So you really want to be creative with that and show people why they might be interested in the film. You don't just want to really sit and talk to the camera. You want to think of some creative ways to get your ideas across. So the theme, maybe you could show some of the script, maybe you could show some of the shots that the cinematographer you have has done in the past. So this is what it kind of is going to look like maybe. Or, you might be able to shoot a short video or a short scene that's kind of has the theme and the feeling of the project that you're going to do. So you really want to do all that stuff to show them what you're capable of and show them what it'll be like. Because a lot of people will just sit in front of the camera and talk, and anybody can do that. Any YouTuber, anybody with a camera, anybody with a webcam can do that. And so it's a lot more boring. Why should we donate to you? What makes you stand out from the rest? And if you're showing them, this is what the feeling of my movie is going to be like, or this is what my cinematographer is capable of. This is what I've directed in the past. This is what the screenwriter has done. Those things will be a lot more engaging and a lot more reason for somebody to contribute.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one thing that me and Coda were talking about is the fact that I can hear myself. Am I echoing?
Oh, and I'll mute.
Okay. One thing that me and Coda were talking about earlier today was, and from one of the videos, I think it was a Film Courage video as well, is basically when we're creating a project, we feel like we're very passionate about it, and all we want is to show people our passion and for that to come through and for them to want to support us and see how passionate we are and how excited we are. But we also have to remember that just like us, there's hundreds of passionate filmmakers out there. So you have to do something that will help you stand out, or like be more dynamic, or show them like what you're bringing to the table. It's an investment, like why they should invest in you, and what about your story is worth investing in, is worth caring about. Coda will go later into detail about some suggestions she gave of like how to do the video or things to show in the video and stuff. But that was something that I was thinking about and talking to him about, because I feel like it is really easy for us to because there's so much that goes into this, right? And so we're thinking about our project and how much we want to get it done and how much we care about it and all this stuff. And sometimes we forget that not everyone is going to have the same reaction to our project as we are. Sometimes we will, more often than not, we'll have to make them care. We'll have to show them why they should care. And that's just what I wanted to add, because I thought that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Because not everyone's going to care about whatever project you're doing, just because even your crew, like some crew might, but they're not going to care as much as whoever the main person is who's trying
And they
to
might love
drive that
filmmaking.
project forward.
And they might love filmmaking, but because there's so many out there, it's like so much easier to go on these crowdfunding websites. There's such a bigger variety of filmmakers trying to create stuff now. Like, you might love film, but it's hard to choose which film you're going to invest in, which film you're going to help out. You know, you want to support a filmmaker, but there's so many out there. And so, you know, you have to kind of show them like, why you should pick me type of thing.
Yeah, you want to set yourself apart, show, you know, your uniqueness. One thing you really need to think about when you're doing a crowdfunding campaign that pretty much everyone was saying, you want to make sure you change your mindset on this to think about it in a different way, because you don't want to think about it as raising funds and getting donations. I keep saying donations. I'm like, no, I have to say contributions because it's different. Donations is somebody giving you money just because, and you taking that money and doing whatever. But you want to change that mindset and think of it more as inviting people to take part and contribute, which is why contributions. You want for them to take part and contribute to the project so that the royal we, as in all of us, everybody donating, the crew, and the people who are running the campaign, all of us together can get this done and create a project. Getting people involved and making it feel like they are part of the creativity, part of the project, and getting this creative project done is something a lot of people like to do. A lot of people are interested in that, getting involved in something like that and making something, getting something done, seeing it from start to finish, getting creative. So you really have to change your mindset on what the crowdfunding is for and think of it more like getting people invited, getting people interested in helping you create that project instead of people giving you money to make the project. So that's something a lot of people were saying on the all the videos. So when you're talking about a crowdfunding campaign, you'll have these things called early bird perks on some sites, depending on which one you're going with. And it's basically just like before you actually launch your campaign, before you even do a soft launch, which is launching it, but not spreading the word. Before even that, you're able to, on certain sites, I think Kickstarter does this. I'm not sure how many of the other ones do it, but probably Indiegogo does it as well. If you email people, you give them a link to the campaign before you even begin. Some people are able to grab these early bird perks, which is like, I donated before you even started your campaign, so I get this perk, this reward for donating early. So it's kind of like if you ever buy video games, the like pre-buying it and you get those extra perks sometimes, something like that. So some
when you
people
pre-order a book, it's the same thing. When you pre-order a CD, like you might get an autograph or a special booklet or like a t-shirt or something like that.
Yeah, and that drives excitement to get people interested in, oh, I get to get a t-shirt and I also get the book and I'm looking forward to this book, so I'm gonna pre-order it. Or this video game is also going to come with a figurine that, or a map or a poster or something that's related to the game. So early bird perks can help drive people to your site and get people to donate before you even actually launch it. So that's another way to get that funding up before you even actually really begin. But you have to, you know, obviously you'll have to spread the word and like get people interested enough to go to that link and donate to get those early bird perks. But if you can do that, you're off to a better start. With some crowdfunding sites, I think I have it right here. With some of them, you have, like in Kickstarter, you have an all or nothing format, which is like you set your goal, and if it doesn't reach that goal, you don't get any of the money, you don't get to keep anything. It all goes back to the people who backed you. So if you set a goal for 10,000 and you got $9,998 and nobody donates the last $2, then you don't get any of the money. But some of them, like Indiegogo, have the fixed or flexible rates. So it's more like if you don't meet your goal, you get to keep whatever is raised. So if you have 10,000 as your goal, but you only get 5,000 or 9,000, you still get to keep the 5,000 or the $9,000 to use on that project. So that's why some people will go with one or the other. Kickstarter has a lot more credibility and a lot more coverage. There's a lot more people. They have a lot larger of a community though, that actually just stays on their site looking through different new projects to contribute to, compared to Indiegogo and some of the others.
Coda?
Yeah.
I was in the bathroom for a bit. Did you mention the some of the suggestions that the girl gave? I wasn't sure.
Of
Like
what?
the one about like showing like the first scene of the movie, or like one of the scenes, like showing what the cinematographer can do, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay, sorry. I just checking because it was a lot that we covered.
Yeah, no, you're good. And with Indiegogo and Kickstarter, they now have the same fees for the platform fees. So if you do raise $10,000, they each have 5%. They'll take 5% from that goal, which means they'll give you 9,500 after they take their percent off the top. Then they also have the payment processing fees, which is like 3% plus 2 cents or 3 cents for every transaction, or every dollar amount or something like that. I don't know the exact, I don't know how they work those 2 cent, 3 cent numbers in, but I think it's either every dollar amount or it's every contribution level. Then they have the reward levels. Kickstarter, you can do 50 or more. It's quite a lot, but if you have a complex project or if you just want to offer a bunch of different kinds of perks and levels to it, you can do 50 or more. Indiegogo, you have a limit of 20. And then I'm not really sure what remarketing is, so I'll leave that alone. But Indiegogo has it, Kickstarter doesn't. But other than that, there's other sites that have different perks. Sure.
Okay, remarketing, is that?
Yeah. There's other perks and other things like that where you might want to use one over the other. Let me see, is there other things? This also has like certain countries that aren't in, that Kickstarter isn't in, where Indiegogo is. The max number of days that you're allowed to run a campaign for, they're both 60. And some of these other things I'm not. Oh, max reward, so $10,000 to, I think it's like a contribution can't be more than 10,000 maybe. And
all right, so
there's some other like
remarketing is behavioral retargeting is a form of online targeting advertising. By online advertising and targeted blah 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 is targeted to consumers based on their previous internet behavior. Okay, so basically they make sure to recommend things to the people that they know with their analytics that will care the most, to like share it to the people that will be most interested in your project instead of just randomly.
Okay. So you want to be sure to do your research and figure out which site's going to work best for you, because there's more than just Indiegogo and Kickstarter now. Those are the two biggest, but for filmmaking anyway, those are two of the biggest. But there's some specifically for filmmaking. There's some specifically for certain kinds of films, or for certain ethnicities or whatever else. There's tons of different specific crowdfunding sites.
Certain religions as well, if you're doing a religious film or something with religious undertones type of thing.
So be sure to, yeah, exactly. So be sure to research, because it might be more beneficial to be more niche with it than it is to just do a broad Kickstarter one.
Yeah, because one thing that they were saying a lot is there are going to be people looking for things on Kickstarter and stuff, but if you're on a specific website, like a faith-based one, applying, then more people that are looking for your specific type of film are going to be there. You know, so the chances of you reaching people, you might reach more people on the other, on the Indiegogo or whatever, but you might reach like more people that are willing to donate or actually interested in your specific project on those smaller sites, more concentrated.
Yeah.
sites.
So some of the ones you might find is like Kickstarter, looks like that. I'm just gonna type these all in so you guys can see them as I go. Indiegogo, looks like that. This TubeStart, which is more for YouTube, like starting a YouTube channel or a YouTube series. So if you're interested in doing something like that, there is that. Seed and Spark, which is something kind of newer, I've heard, and that's more filmmaking centric. So that is one of the other ones. It's a little less known, but some people like it more just because the people know they're going in for films, and that's pretty much it. You have Rocket Hub, which, I mean, I'm not sure what this one caters to exactly, but I think it's like, you know, it has a few different ones. Junction, well, Junction, crowdfunding.
For Junction.
Yeah. So Junction, you have, what is it, Slated. Slated crowdfunding, which is more geared towards movies again.
Maybe just write crowdfunding before or after all of them, just in case.
Yeah. If I can write crowdfunding right. You have Juicer, which is apparently catered towards like Jewish communities and things like that. So somebody had a Jewish centric film and they posted to this one and were successful just because it was more like for the Jewish crowd, or it had like a Jewish story in it. So it could be on this specific one. Faith Launcher, if you're going to do something, I think that's more Christian based. So if you're going to make a Christian based film, yeah, Christian crowdfunding, you could use this one and you'll find.
We didn't see it.
There.
Yeah, we didn't see it in the websites, but I'm sure if there's a Jewish one and a Christian one, there's probably also for the Muslim community and other religious groups, and
I'm sure whatever religion's out there
well.
that you are in, or you're making a movie about or something like that, I'm sure there's going to be a crowdfunding site that's dedicated and specific to that.
I mean, you never know, but not all religions, because you never know. There's a lot of them out there, but the main ones. And
then there's GoFundMe, which isn't used as much for filmmaking as maybe it once was, but there is another option. And then there's plenty more, like we're saying, there's a bunch of just like, here's a picture of some of these ones: Fundable, Kickstarter, CrowdRise, Fund My Pet. I mean, they're different ones catered to different things. So obviously they're not all going to work for filmmaking, but they are something to look into, especially if you have a specific film going towards a specific genre or niche. Maybe your film's about a pet, so maybe that pet one would allow you to try to crowdfund on there, and maybe you'll have a better success because that's not really, the crowdfunding site doesn't really have a lot of films go to it, and so that's something unique that sets you apart in that community, in that website. So that's some stuff to think about besides just going with the obvious two.
If you're making a website, if you're making a film that is promoting a community or showing another side, like these two brothers, they were talking about a film about human trafficking in the US and raising awareness towards that and showing that it happens here too. like you can sometimes go to these organizations. I'm pretty sure Mai did something similar with her faith-based healing thing. But you can maybe talk to these organizations and be like, hey, I would love to make a film and to help raise awareness for your cause or for your organization, or for like tell a story of one of your survivors, you know, something like that. And you might get support from that, and a greater movement too, to help mutual help. You promote your film and also help the community even further, you know.
Well, yeah, but that's not really crowdfunding. That's more like finding an investment.
No, I know, but I
company.
just mean that like there are websites where you can ask them, hey, can I put my film on your website, and see if people who also would like to raise awareness towards this would like to help fund my film, you know,
So if
to
you're
get the
doing
word out.
crowdfunding, that would be a good way to reach out to that crowd and say, hey, I'm making a thing about this. And they were
Yeah.
actually talking about that, like that they were able to link their crowdfunding campaign to that website where the people were talking about that specific health issue. And so, you know, they saw that maybe you get more people that are willing to give it to spread the word about this health issue to people, or this what was it? Trafficking. Yeah, like trafficking in the US. So they were like, it happens here, so we're trying to spread the word that it happens here. And so like they'd go to those specific websites that are dedicated to that and ask them if they could promote it on their website and have a better chance of getting people that might be interested in going to that specific thing and contributing to it.
Yeah, that would also help you if that's the kind of film you're wanting to make. That would also help you get more awareness and more eyes on it. People that already want to help see that and are interested in it and can have something tangible to show to other people, like, hey, I know that an article is a lot, but this film is really good and it tells a story that's really interesting.
Yeah. So when you're making your campaign, they say that the pitch video should be between about 2 to 4 minutes. That has to do with engagement and how long somebody might watch the thing. You want to make sure that they watch it all the way through. You know, if they're getting bored in your video 4 minutes, they're less likely to think that you can handle a 90-minute feature film or a 20-minute short film or whatever you're doing. So you want to make sure that you try to keep it short and to the point, but also showing off what you're capable of and what your team is capable of, instead of just talking it all. You want to show and don't tell as much as you can. So show some things and then say, hey, this is me. This is what I'm capable of. Show some more things. Hey, this is me. I'm the cinematographer. This is what I'm, you know, that was some stuff that I've done before, and all of that, so that you can show those different things and build excitement for it, but also keep people entertained and keep it to the point so that it's short enough for people to just watch the whole thing without getting bored. You also want to be sure that you read the fine print of the websites you are comparing whenever you are talking about these different crowdfunding websites. There are different fees that you need to take into account. There's the earnings percentage, which is the platform fee. That's the fee that takes from your total earnings. So if you do $10,000, some sites will take 3%, some sites will take 9%, and others will be in between somewhere. So you need to check that out, make sure that you know how much they're going to take off of your amount, and then be able to maybe factor that into your total campaign goal. You also, there's the transaction fees like we were talking about, which is just a percentage taken from every transaction that happens. So, or sometimes it could be a flat rate. So it could be like 25 cents per transaction, which means if somebody donates $50, they take 25 cents from it. You're like, all right, that's not that bad. That's like 0.5% or something. But if they take a percentage of every transaction, then the lower, then like if somebody donates you or contributes $20, they'll take 3%, which would be like 60 cents. So it's a bit higher than that flat rate. But then if you get a bunch of like low contributions, if you have a flat rate of 25 cents per transaction and people are, giving you $2, then that's more than 10% of the money taken out for each transaction. So sometimes flat rates can be good if people are going to give more money. Otherwise, it's going to be a bad thing. A lot of sites typically, from what I've seen, a lot of the sites have the percentage fees for the transaction. So it's just going to take out a percentage of all of them anyway. So you have to factor that in too, to your total amount. Whatever they give, it's going to have some percentage taken out. And then whatever your total is, it's going to have a percentage taken out of that. And so some sites will have like a really low earnings percentage, like 3% from the total, right? So, oh, that's awesome because Kickstarter and Indiegogo take 5%. But then if that site takes 6% for transaction fees, they're ending up taking like 9% compared to maybe Indiegogo or something, which takes 3% from a transaction fee and 5% from earnings. So they only take 8%. So you have to factor that in and add it up and think about which one is actually going to come out to being worth more in the end. And the sites, some of the sites, Indiegogo used to do this, but they said they recently changed it to be 5% no matter what of the platform fee. But some sites that have that flexible funding, it's called, where you can keep the money no matter if you get to your goal or not. Some of those have it, if you don't reach your goal, they'll take out a larger percentage of the funds. So Indiegogo used to do it where if you didn't reach your goal, if you set that goal for $10,000, but you only got 9,000, they're going to take 9% instead of 5 or instead of 4 or something like that. So they would take a lot more money out of your whole thing because you didn't reach your goal. And that's why some people would still stick with the fixed rate because they tried to get the lesser fee. If you reached your goal, then you would have to pay less. But if you didn't, you had to pay a lot more. So some people would do that. Now Indiegogo is one of the ones where they do 5% regardless if you do fixed rate or flexible funding where you get to keep the money. So whether you make your goal or not, you pay 5%. Doesn't matter as much. But some of the other sites that copy that kind of way of doing the crowdfunding, where they're copying Indiegogo, and they're doing that. If you don't meet your goal, you'll only pay us. You get to keep all your money. Some of them will charge a significant more percentage if you don't meet the goal. So you want to look into that, make sure that's not going to happen, because if you don't meet the goal and you do have flexible funding on, you want to make sure that it's not going to take all your money away with a percentage fee for the site, because then you're coming out with even less. Or if you do know about it, you just want to make sure that you know about it before you get involved with it anyway. And then there's some sites that offer the option to allow your contributors to actually pay for their own processing fees. So that can save you a lot of money if they're willing to pay that extra 3% so that you don't have to. Because if all of your contributors were to do that, then you don't have to pay any of those processing fees. And all you have to do is pay that platform fee at the end when you reach your goal. But a lot of them won't do that, won't offer that. And that'll just mean that you have to end up paying the processing fees on top of the platform fee after your goal is reached. But your processing fees you'll be paying throughout. Every time anybody contributes any money, that 3% or whatever the percentage is for the processing fee will get taken out of that money that they're contributing. You also have to understand from doing a crowdfunding campaign that the money that you make from it is going to be treated as income on your taxes, at least in the US. I'm not sure about other countries, but in the US, if you make any money from that, they're going to treat it as income and they're going to tax you for that income. So if you're putting it to a company's name or you're putting it to your name, just be aware that whatever you get, it's going to be taxed, whatever tax bracket you fall in or your company falls in. So keep that in mind, keep that money off to the side so that you don't end up having to pay thousands of dollars potentially later on when tax season comes. I mean, you'll still have to pay it, but you'll have it to the side so it won't be like you have to come up with that money. And then some of the other tips are just don't set your goal too low, or people are going to think that you're an amateur who doesn't understand what it's going to cost to actually make that film. But also you don't want to set it too high, because then you might never reach your goal, especially if you're doing something like Kickstarter. You don't want to set your goal too high to the point where you're not going to get any of that money if you don't get 100% of your goal funded. But you also don't want to set it too low. Some people, like they're saying, some people will go on Indiegogo because they have that flexible funding and they'll give you the money if you get your goal or not. They'll just put it to like $500 or $1,000 or something really low when they know they need 10 to 15 to whatever amount of money. And that they'll think that that's going to get people to just give them the money really quickly because they'll reach their goal easily. But what it actually does is makes people go, a sci-fi movie for $500? Nah, they're not gonna be able to do that. I'm not funding this. Those people don't know what they're doing. So that's why you don't want to set it too low, because it actually will deter people from treating it seriously and deter people from giving you the funding for that project. You also, again, but then you don't want to set it too high to where you don't reach your goal. So you really have to do your research to figure out what you might be able to get, what your friends and family might be able to give you. If you have a bunch of rich people that you know and they're really close to you, you might be able to get a lot more than somebody who doesn't have very many contacts or who has a lot of poor people that they know. So really look at that, see who might give you stuff, how much it might be. Just make an educated guess based on your friends and family and who you know, how much money they have, or how much discretionary income they make. And then you can kind of factor that into your campaign and figure out how much to set your goal at, depending on that. Or you might just have like a goal. If you're trying to completely fund your project through crowdfunding, you might know the exact budget that you need to get that project made. So you might just want to say, oh, well, I'll just set it to this and hope for the best, no matter how many people I know. Because I can't make this film for less than $15,000. I can't make it for less than 50, whatever amount it is, you'll be able to set your goal to that because you know that you can't make it for less. You've already done the budgeting. You've already figured out what the cost is going to be. And so you already know what you're going to need to make like the absolute minimum that you might need to get the project going, greenlit. You should also think about stretch goals. Stretch goals is if you do happen to make 100% of your goal, you want to keep that enthusiasm going for further contributions. So, okay, if I do get 100%, then $5,000. If your goal is $10,000, then you might say, well, if we get to $12,000, we will do this. We will add this actor. We will do, we'll add a location, or we'll be able to film with this thing, with this camera. And if we get $15,000, this is what's going to happen. And you want to think about those stretch goals just in case you do get your film fully funded for whatever goal you set it to. That way, you still reason for people to keep contributing more money because they want you to reach those stretch goals. So sometimes, those can be really successful and people can get a lot of extra money on top of their 100% because they have some really cool stretch goals in there that people are interested in seeing happen. Some cons to using crowdfunding is failing to get that goal reached, because that can be embarrassing and it could also possibly lose investors. If you are trying to use it as just a extra financing option and you don't meet that goal, you might have either, if you've already gotten investors to say they'll invest money into your project, or if you haven't gotten it yet, they might drop out, or they might be harder to get them to give you money if they see that your campaign was unsuccessful, because they're like, well, nobody's interested in this, so I'm not going to get my money, am I? Even though it might just be that your marketing and your campaign was unsuccessful, it doesn't necessarily mean that your film will be. It still deters investors from it because they see that it was unsuccessful, and they just see it as people not being interested. So that's one thing that's a con to it. Another is competition. You know, in the early days when these were first coming out, there wasn't many people doing it, trying to raise money for films. But right when that started and people started seeing that it was successful, that it was an option, and like, oh, people will invest in this film. Okay. And then everybody started doing it. And so now there's a lot of competition out there. And so it's going to be really hard to set yourself apart compared to what it used to be. The other thing is costs, and it's actually going to cost some money. Most likely, if you're doing it, if you're trying to like research it and do it right, it's going to cost a little bit of money to try to figure out what you need to do. Some people will do their research by contributing to other projects and seeing what they do and following them throughout their project. So for 30 days or 60 days, they'll be following that project and seeing what they do and what works and what doesn't. And they do that by contributing to them so they can see all the insider information that they're giving out, all that perks, you know, the early, if there's anything, any updates and stuff like that, the people who contribute are the first ones to receive the information. So they'll contribute to see what these other campaigns are doing. And then they'll see if they're successful, who's successful, why, what did they do? And they'll be able to see like maybe this person updated people more often, or maybe they just made it more exciting, or maybe they kept asking for help to get people interested in spreading the word themselves. Like, I can't do this alone. I need all of you guys. I know you guys have contributed and I love you and thank you. If you can try to get your friends or family interested in this, or someone you might know, spread the word. And then, you know, maybe that worked. Maybe people got more people involved. So that could be a cost. There's other costs to it. Like maybe you need to create a video. So you're going to create a trailer for it, or you're going to create a short film to try to get interest in a feature film, or just making a high quality video, the pitch video. So those things could cost money if you're trying to actually do them really well, if you're trying to put a lot of quality into it. So it's not just going to be completely free most of the time. And that's a con, because you could end up paying a little bit of money and then it not doing anything and nobody getting interested in it, and your campaign failed, and so then you just spent money for nothing. And it's just a lot of extra work, you know, it's a lot of research, it's a lot of work, it's like a full-time job, it's a lot to do, a lot to try to keep people engaged, and all that just for it might not even working out. So that's a definite con to it. And there's also just extra work with the perks. Even if you do 100% get your goal, you're going to have to deliver those perks to whoever you promised them to. And whatever you promised, you're going to have to do. So there was video calls to everybody, and you got 50 backers to do that. And now you have to have a 1 hour video chat with 50 people. And that's like 50 hours of work. I mean, it might be all right. It might not be that bad, but it's still 50 hours of time you have to spend doing that. Or if you promise them t-shirts or cups or some kind of design thing, you're going to have to design it, get it made, and then send it out and ship it out to everybody. That could take a lot of time. That could take some money for the shipping costs. So, I mean, all that stuff you just have to think about when you're talking about it. But the pros are like, it's free money. It grows your audience. And I think I actually have a website that talks about the pros. Maybe I don't. Well, it's free money. You can grow your audience by doing it. And it really helps you to understand what kind of audience is going to like this project anyway. So you have a better chance of finding your target audience, or figuring out beforehand, hopefully. And so then you know what kind of distributors to go for if you are able to make your film, even without this crowdfunding campaign working out. You still have a better understanding of what your audience will be. You might have gained long-term fans that even though you weren't able to make this one project, they're going to follow you on all your stuff now, and they're going to wait for you to come out with something new. And they liked what they saw, and they're going to help you out with anything else you're trying to do, or they're going to just be a fan of it and go see it in theaters or watch it on the streaming service or watch it on the website when it comes out. And so you'll grow your fan base a little more just by doing stuff like this, and you'll get more of an online presence from trying. So those are some of the pros that you might come across when you're doing this. Up on the screen, I have just like a few statistics I found, like the average amount a film project raises on Kickstarter, which Kickstarter is still the most popular one, even for filmmakers. I believe it's still just the most used because it's the most known and has the biggest audience, the biggest community. So the average amount of film project raises on Kickstarter is around $12,000, with the average short film raising about $5,600. So that's something to keep in mind. That doesn't mean that you have to set yours to 12,000, but it just means the average amount is around that area if you add them all together and divide. Some might be for 20,000, some might be for 5, and it just averages out to 12. Indiegogo has some statistics they show with some of the things you might find. They say like most successful campaigns that they had on their website ran for 30 to 39 days. So even though they have a max of 60 or a minimum of like 0 to 9, the most successful ones were 30 to 39 days. So about a month, a little over a month to around a month were the most successful ones. On average, the more successful campaigns, they had 4 campaign updates throughout their time. So throughout those 30 days, they were updating the people maybe every 5 to 10 days to keep them updated on what's going on, how the campaign is doing, and what they need to reach their goals. On average, the campaigns raised 42% of their funds in the first and last 3 days of the campaign's duration. And that's why they say don't forget to plan your mid-campaign strategy, because there's that lull. So you see the line, there's the most engagement in the beginning, because that's when your friends, your family, you're releasing for the first time. So all of your fans, if you have any, they're all ready to go and fund this thing and contribute and get involved. Then, the excitement starts to die down and there's a little bit of a lull for the most of the other amount of the project. There's not much going on. Then if your campaign's a little successful, it's at 60, 70, 80%, it starts to pick up again. Hey guys, we only have a few days left. We really need to get this funding. We have, 18% of our goal left to go. Help us out. And then you get more people interested in like, oh, I'm going to contribute because they almost reached it. And the closer you get, the more people are willing to give. And then even if you're over 100%, a lot of the times those last 3 days, people are just willing to give it because they see that it's about to run out of time. So they want to be involved, especially if it's successful. They're like, oh, I want to be involved if it's, they're successful. I want to be involved in this film because I see that they're going to be successful with it. So the last 3 days, the first 3 days, even on Kickstarter and other crowdfunding campaigns, a lot of them follow the same kind of stats. Some of them might be, somewhat different, but the majority of them fall around the same area. And so you will mostly get the most engagement in the beginning and the end of your campaign, no matter what the duration is. So that's why they always say, like, try to keep engagement going in the middle, because you can really get some people, you can get some spikes back up in there. So it's not just a big, huge smiley face. It's It's, it has spiky teeth in the middle somewhere where it's spiking up to get more interest because people are giving because you have a new perk, you have a new update, you have a new video that came out talking about it. And so you got more people engaged again, instead of it just being pretty low for the most part for all the way in the beginning or in the middle. They say on average, successful campaigners add 12 new perks after launch. So that's a lot. 12 new perks. So they're constantly adding a new thing to the project, to the campaign. Something new to look at, to go over, to see maybe you're interested in getting this, maybe you're interested in getting that. 30 days to 39 days is the duration. And this isn't just for films, for Indiegogo, this is for all of their campaigns. So you might not need 12 perks with a film because there's only so much you can do. But it's just interesting to know these statistics. So if you try to do a campaign or something like that, just know that you should add new perks to gain people that might be interested in the project, but they're not interested in all the perks that you already have. They might come back to it when you get new perks because that's something they're more interested in. They might be more interested in doing a voiceover role, and you offer that later. They're like, oh, sweet, all I have to do is send it in. And, and then they have a more of a reason to contribute later when you post it. So the next statistic is talking about if you have a team running your campaign, they typically can get 3 times more funds than a campaign run by an individual. And that's because there's a lot of social media to this type of stuff. There's a lot of interaction, commenting, replying, liking, sharing, tweeting, retweeting, all these different social media platforms and all these people asking questions or commenting, just anything. You want to have a lot of engagement in all of these types of things. And that's why when there's a team, when there's people that can help out with that, it's a lot better. It's a lot more engagement. So it's a lot more fun and active and exciting for the contributors or people willing to contribute than somebody who's doing it alone. So that's something to also think about. If you're able to get another teammate, if you're able to get a team of 3 or more, or 2 or more, it's just going to be better than just if you have only one person doing it. Some campaigns don't even have a pitch video, I guess. I didn't even know that was a thing, but they say campaigns with a pitch video raise 4 times more funds than campaigns without one. It kind of makes sense, but for filmmaking, it definitely doesn't. You definitely need to have a pitch video. So, you got to show that you're capable of doing some kind of filming, no matter what it is, even if it is just sitting and looking at the camera and talking to it. You got to show something because you're talking about making a film. You want to show that you know how to handle the camera at least. So those are some things you need to think about. And then it talks about at the bottom where the top 5 contributing countries are. Canada, the United States. Well, the United States is number 1, then Canada, United Kingdom, Germany, and Australia. So those are the main places you'll get contributions from. Now, if you have a film that's about France, maybe you'll get a lot more from France than you would Germany or United Kingdom or something. But if it's just something more general, then the top ones are United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Germany, and Australia. So with Kickstarter, the success rate as of December 2021, so a few months ago, the success rate of fully funding a project on their website, Kickstarter, was 39.37%. So out of all the projects that try to get money, try to reach their goals, only 39% do. I'm not sure how much of that equates to filmmaking because Kickstarter has a lot more than just films, but it is just a good statistic to know that, less than half of them reach their goals out of all of the projects that are on Kickstarter. Yeah, all right. Already went over that. All right, actually, does anybody have any questions or comments or anything to add about crowdfunding? All right. Last thing we're going to talk about is post-production sound equipment. And this is pretty quick because we already went over a lot of sound equipment earlier in the semester, and even I think it was last semester when we talked about sound. So this is specifically just for the stuff that happens in post-production. A lot of the other information that we've already gone over about like mics and things like that, you can find earlier in the semester and the semester about sound. But with post-production, instead of just having shotgun microphones and lavalier microphones, you want to maybe have one better suited for narration and voiceover, like a condenser microphone that is like a large diaphragm condenser microphone or a small diaphragm condenser microphone. Most shotgun microphones are condenser, and so some people will choose those over the other choices of mics that you can get. But with voiceover and narration, you'll see a lot of people use something like, if you look to the left, actually, let me just click it. So the mic on the right, something like that, you'll see people use that more often for voiceovers than a shotgun mic, like you would on set. And then there's also some people who use dynamic mics, but typically those are only used with instruments like drums or things that are really loud because they're less sensitive. And so the condenser microphones are usually the go-to for narration and voiceover work. It is subjective, so especially with different voices, you might have different things, different mics used. So not everything is 100% fact. It's just saying like, it's just that it really depends on the voice and how your voice sounds and what you're trying to cut out when you're talking about which mic to choose and why. With Foley work and sound effects, you usually use condenser microphones as well because they're more sensitive to picking up quieter sounds. So if you're trying to pick up really the whole sound for the sound effect, a condenser microphone's better because it can pick up the range from the low sounds to the louder ones. If you're trying to pick up really loud sounds with like explosions and things like that, then you might use a dynamic microphone that is less sensitive so that it doesn't go too high and start to distort the audio because they can handle a really big range of loud sounds. For a large diaphragm, a large diaphragm mic is something like on the right and a small diaphragm is on the left. With a small diaphragm mic, you're going to have more self noise. So the mic itself is going to be he's going to have a little bit more of a hum. And that's typically one of the reasons why large diaphragm mics are used more for voiceovers, so that there isn't that annoying noise over the top. Like that's less often happening in large diaphragm than small diaphragm. And so that's one reason why they go with that. Again, sensitivity for a small diaphragm condenser mic, it's a little bit lower than a large diaphragm mic would be. So if you're trying to pick up the wide range of the voice and everything, the really low bass noises, then a large diaphragm would work better. But it would also be a little more picking up room tone. So that is a, kind of either a pro or a con, depending on if you have a sound, what's it called? sound treated room. So if you treated the room to make sure that it doesn't have a lot of echo and a lot of noises bouncing off everywhere with like different material and sound foam and all these other things you can do, sound blankets to block sound from bouncing everywhere, then a large diaphragm would work better. But if you're not able to do that for whatever reason, and you have just a room that's kind of makes a lot more noise, maybe a small diaphragm condenser mic would be better, because it's going to pick up less of that, less of the lower frequencies like room tone. Frequency range is a little wider on small diaphragm mics than it is on large. And the dynamic range is a little higher, so it can go lower and it can pick up lower and louder all at once. So it's a little bit more of a dynamic range for picking up sound than the large diaphragm mics. Small diaphragm condenser mics are typically also better at following the sound waves more accurately, so they have more of a natural sound and don't really adjust anything. And they have very consistent polar patterns. So if your actor is moving around a lot, maybe a smaller dynamic, a small diaphragm condenser mic would be better. But again, it's subjective. For better and more natural sounds, for more natural sounds, that is when you want the small diaphragm microphone. So with like things like Foley and sound effects, you want to use a small diaphragm condenser mic so that it picks up more of those noises exactly as they sound, and not adjusting them at all, and not adding anything to them. While a large diaphragm mic will add a bit more to the what's it called? To the low frequencies, and that will make it sound a little more like full, a little more deep, and give it a bit more of a different sound. And so most people will like it for the voiceover and narration, because it adjusts the voice and makes it sound a little bit deeper and more full. But for like sound effects and recording, that kind of thing, you want it to be more natural and exactly as it sounds when you're recording it, so it doesn't adjust the noise or the sound of it at all. So that's why you might use one or the other. With condenser microphones, you also have what is called proximity effect. And if you look at the picture, you can see that just means the closer you are to the mic, the louder the low frequencies are going to be. And so people often like that whenever they're close to the mic and they have like the more of that radio type voice, the radio or the podcast. You listen to people that talk like that or that narrate over videos or trailers, they have that deeper, darker voice. And that's usually because the bass and the lower frequencies are getting boosted when they're getting closer to it, and it's giving them more of a boosted bass to their voice. So it's a little more full sounding, a little bit more deep as well. But the farther away the mic is, the more flat it is. So again, if the actor's moving back and forth, which they really don't want to do if they're trying to voice act, it's going to make their voice sound different. So that's why sometimes you might try to get a larger diaphragm or a smaller diaphragm because of that, because they'll react differently to the proximity effect. They won't be as sensitive when things get close compared to if they're far. They'll be a little more neutral, a little more flat, compared to maybe the larger diaphragm, which is a little bit more reactive to it. And so if the actor does like to move around a lot and move their head back and forth because they're kind of acting with the voiceover, then it might be better to get that smaller diaphragm mic. Remember that with ADR, audio dialogue replacement, you want to use the mic that was used on set unless you're replacing the whole scene. If you're trying to match one piece of dialogue to the rest of the scene and you're only replacing one line, you want to get the same mic that was used on set to try to match it as closely as possible. Don't want to use a different mic because it's going to sound different for various reasons. Some of the other stuff you'll get from mics is like a shock mount, as well as a pop filter to stop those from hitting the mic. So it's not going to have those big puffs of wind from your, whenever you say something with a P, you won't have a P going into the mic. So that's what that blocks. And the shock mount will stop it from shaking around and causing any kind of noise from any movement the mic has. It'll just like leave it kind of suspended in the air. You want to make sure you get one for the condenser microphones because they're going to be different than if you have one for a shotgun microphone, which will be a little bit smaller. Condensers will have a much bigger hole to put the mic in because those mics are often a lot wider than a shotgun microphone, which is a lot skinnier. All right. Do you have any questions or comments so far about like the mics to use in post-production? All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about tonight is just mixing consoles that you'll use in post-production. And mixing consoles for post-production are like the big, huge ones that you'll find. The ones that go on set are like the smaller, little compact travel ones that you, maybe it's as big as like a keyboard, a little fatter than a keyboard, but it's about that width. Whereas the ones that you'll find in post-production, it's typically going to be that much larger one that has a lot more channels and a lot more capabilities whenever you're watching it in like a theater room or something like that, or you're having a home studio. Some people will have a console, something like maybe like this. So that is something to, they're going to be something different. I mean, they're going to be the same thing. They do the same stuff, but they just have more capabilities, more controls on them than the smaller ones. So I just opened a few websites so we can kind of talk about the different things you might want to look for if you're talking about a mixing console for post-production. They say there's about 4 stages of growth if you're doing sound. It's the bedroom studio. It's typically a small bed setup next to your bed. Dedicated home studio, which you have your own room solely for recording and doing sound editing and things like that. And it's acoustic, it's treated. You put some sound stuff up to treat the room. Semi-pro studio can be either in your home or a different location, and typically includes equipment necessary to record multiple musicians simultaneously, or just multiple voiceovers or something like that. And then they have the pro studio, which is like a commercial facility and includes whatever necessary tools to produce professional results in the most efficient way. So the bedroom studio, you're going to have your computer, your digital audio workstation, which is just a software that does music or audio interface, microphones, headphones, studio monitors, cables, microphone stands, and a pop filter. Audio interface is going to be your field recorder or something like that, mixer. Everything else is pretty much what we've already gone over before. Studio monitors, or what's it called? The speakers. That's something that we haven't really gone over, that I haven't really seen much on, but you want to make sure that they have a flat frequency response so that they're giving the sound of the audio. They're not adjusting it. It's just like with headsets, when we talked about with the headphones, and you have some boost the bass up and some adjust some of the treble and some of the lower, higher frequencies and things like that. You really want a flat response where it's not adjusting anything. It's just playing it back as it sounds. So if you're going to get speakers, you want to make sure that they have a flat response so that they give you exactly as the file sounds, and you're not going to adjust it based on what you're hearing. If it's adding boost, you're not going to lower the boost thinking that there's too much boost in it when really it's just your speakers. And then when somebody else hears it, they're like, there's no lower frequencies in this at all. It doesn't sound, there's no bass. So that's something you definitely don't want to do. You want to make sure you get flat frequency response in your headphones and your speakers if you get them. All the rest of the stuff we already talked about. For the more like professional dedicated room, they say you're going to have like a desk or a workstation, studio chairs, bass traps, acoustic panels, diffusers, reflection filters, monitor isolation pads, and studio monitor stands. Desk and the workstation is going to be that that mixer that we're talking about. The mixing console is going to be the workstation where you're able to adjust the things on there. It's basically the same thing as if you had a digital audio workstation, where it's just as the which is just the software. But with the software, you have to use your mouse to adjust everything. And when you're editing or when you're doing sound editing, it takes a lot longer to grab it, click it and drag it, or grab it and use your keys to move it over a percentage or two. It's a lot easier to use like a workstation, like in the picture, where you're just twisting a knob really quickly while you're hearing it and while it's playing back. So that's why these are used. It speeds it up a lot more and gives you, it lets you also really like dial it into a very specific level or gain level or adjusting the effect to a certain extent. It's a lot more precise than just using a computer and a mouse. Studio chairs, I mean, that's just computer chairs. You'll have to look that up. It's not really that important. Bass traps is like some of the sound foam, the sound treatment you'll get where you're putting it in the corners or on the wall, sometimes the ceiling and the floor, different areas of the room so that it's blocking some of that noise and not having too much sound bounce around the place. Acoustic panels, same thing, same uses. I mean, they're both used like for different frequency waves, but they're both used for the same thing, for not letting that sound bounce around the room and get all over the place. Diffusers, I've actually never seen that. Diffusers is an important element of their acoustic treatment plan because it creates a nice natural ambience without removing too much of the liveliness of the room. Okay, so it's kind of like, it's gonna still sound like it's in a room if you get something like this, but it will still block out some of those waves from coming back at you and making it sound very echoey and reverb. So it'll block a lot of the reverb, but it'll still make it sound a little bit more like it's in a room because it's still made out of wood or like a wall. It's just different. Looks like little cubbies because I guess the sound goes in further or less so that it doesn't have just one flat surface. The flat surfaces is where the sound will bounce off that surface and go all over the place. If it's just one flat thing, like a wall in your house, which is why with the panels, with these diffusers, you see they have like little ridges and different things to kind of get the sound waves to not be able to just bounce straight off of it back at wherever it came from, but kind of get stuck in between these little wedges and bounce around before escaping out the sides. So it lessens the reverb that comes back at you. And then there's also these things called reflection filters, which I'm guessing they do pretty much the same thing. They say it's noticeably less effective than a proper acoustic treatment, but they're still better than nothing at all because they're not just one flat surface, they're not just one flat wall. They're curved, so at least the sound will maybe bounce off of the sides like once or twice before coming back at you. And there's what's called monitor isolation pads. By the way, I haven't read any of this stuff yet, so that's why I'm kind of reading it now. You see, by placing your studio monitors directly on a desk, sound vibrations transfer through the surface of the desk, which decreases the accuracy of the monitors themselves and can even create new and unpredictable resonances from any other objects receiving those vibrations. Monitor isolation pads solve this problem by creating a buffer of acoustic isolation between your monitors and your desk, preventing any vibration from transferring. So you don't want anything coming from your monitor going into your sound, pretty much. And these will help isolate that, give them kind of a cushion and a pad before they hit that hard surface that your monitor would sit on. And they talk about studio, let's see. Semi-pro stuff. Yeah, I haven't even looked into any of this. Okay, so I'm not going to go over this stuff. This is getting a little more in depth about some of the higher end sound stuff. But if you'd like to go on this website, it is ehomerecordingstudio.com. And this is when they're saying when you get into the semi-pro studio, which could be in your home, but it's going to be very heavily sound treated. It's going to be kind of isolated. And then you might start getting some of this stuff, which is used for more than just like filmmaking post-production. It's also used for, some of the stuff is used for recording live instruments and musicians and bands. So some of that stuff you don't really need if you're just doing post-production audio for films. But if you're trying to, you know, create a musical instrumental for your project, then, you know, that's something you might want to do and get this kind of stuff. Let's see. But yeah, so basically when you're talking about a mixer, the main thing, it's the same information we've already gone over for the one that you use on set. The one for post-production, however, is just larger and has a bit more stuff that it's able to do. Like a bit more, it has a lot more of these knobs. It's not as small usually. It's gonna be a lot larger where it has more channels, which is just the from top to bottom, those little where those lines are, that's going to be one channel. So if you have a mic going into one, those knobs below it, those two green knobs, one blue knob and one white knob are going to be for that one mic. And so, or that one thing that you're mixing. So if you're mixing something on the, usually they'll be like each track will have one channel. So if you're doing like a 30 track post-production audio edit, then each of these vertical lines will have options for each channel, so you can boost the different adjustments. And there's going to be a lot more options on the big ones than just those three little knobs. It's going to be more like these little sliders and these knobs so that you can adjust the sound and the gain and the EQ and some of the other things. Some common features you'll get is microphone preamps. You can have a preamp, and you should have a good one because the preamp will give it larger, more sound. It'll boost it up better and have less noise internally. Phantom power. So if you are plugging in a condenser microphone or a shotgun microphone and you are recording on set, you're going to do a live mix, then it'll give that power to that microphone. Main outputs, handy features to look for. They say the pad. Sometimes an electronic instrument's output is too strong for the mixer's preamp to handle. So switching on a pad will lower the incoming signal to a controllable level. Low cut or high pass filters, those are the same thing we learned about when we were doing the sound editing exercise. High pass filter will cut out the lower noises so that there's less room tone and it's only the high frequencies that are going through at a certain point. Assignment buttons for some of them where you'll be able to assign different things. So if you're using whatever you use the most when you're sound editing, you'll be able to assign it to your console and say, this button does this. on-off mute buttons. A convenient feature is the ability to mute channels. So if you are hearing tracks from the computer, you'll be able to quickly mute something. If you don't want to hear, if you have the music on one track and you don't want to hear the music, so you can really zone in and listen to these sound effects and all that, you can click a button and mute the channel. So all you hear is the rest of them and not the music. A pan control directs a mono signal onto 2 output buses at different relative levels. On a stereo channel, the pan adjusts the left-right balance. So if you're doing stereo audio where one's coming from the left, one's coming from the right, and it's equal, you can have a panning control where you say you want it to be louder on the left or louder on the right. Maybe your character's on the left side of screen and you want the audio to sound a little bit higher on the left speaker, just because that character is coming from the left. So it feels more like a 3D space than just what you would get otherwise. And then the rest is just like the special effects and the equalizer and all that stuff that you'll find on any mixer, any audio control that you do. So these is basically, it's just a really quick, it's like doing quick keys on an editing thing, on an editing software, a picture editing software, where you just click V to select, you click C to cut, all of those things. But this just really speeds up the process. It allows you to control each channel individually and to hear it and play it back while editing it and adjusting whatever you want really quickly for each channel as you go from top to bottom. The bigger they are, the more controls they'll have, and the real difference is just that they have more channels that they can do. They have more inputs and outputs. So if you do need to record something, but you also need to receive in some sound and some audio, you can do that. And they have a master control in the middle where you can control everything at once. And the bigger ones will just have more channels, more things, more knobs and buttons and different things that it's able to do. Some of the brands, if you are looking to get one of these, and some of these, they're really expensive. Some of them, they're not too bad. So it really just depends on what your budget is and how much you're wanting to put into this. And if you have a dedicated area for it, because they are also very big. If you get the ones that are where you sit down and have to move a chair from one side to the other. So that is why you might sometimes just have the ones that are about the size of a keyboard or a little bit larger if you don't have the space for these. But if you're trying to be a little bit more professional, get some better sound editing or set up a studio, then you definitely want to look into getting one of these. Some of the brands I've come across is Yamaha, Solid State Logic, Digico, I think it's Midas or Midas, Allen and Heath, Kodak, Soundcraft, Avid.
I'm pretty sure it's Midas.
Midas, maybe.
I've heard people pronounce it Midas, so it could be wrong.
Studor, Lawo, some of these weird. Behringer, Zoom, Tascam, Alto Professional, Mackie. I did Midas twice, and then Presonus or Presonus. So there's quite a few brands with this as well, and it probably depends on what the budget level is and the kind. When you're talking about film, I believe you don't want to do analog. You want to get the digital ones because you want to be able to connect it to the digital audio that you've recorded. So I believe you don't want to get analog for that reason. Analog is more used for bands and live recordings of musicians and things like that, I believe. But I would just look into that, double check, because I'm not 100% on that fact. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or things to add for that?
I'm good.
All right. So I just want to remind everybody that we have that exercise due. Wait, let me see, where is it? Exercise due April 7th. It's going to be the second editing style exercise that we have. It's going to be based off of the style of editing that was used in Inception, which is a lot of parallel editing and cross-cutting. And I sent out an email last week about it, or Tuesday, about it. So that will be due April 7th. It's about a month. If anyone's interested in participating in that, you just have to make basically a little short scene that has some kind of parallel editing or cross-cutting in it and match it to, and that's pretty much it, actually. That's the style, that's the editing style that we're going for this time. So you're going to create that, and you can either take some from other films, like take some footage from something that's already been done and just make it feel like it's coming, like it's parallel editing. So it's coming from the same place, or it's paralleling each other by showing the differences or similarities between the characters as if they were in the same film or the same TV show. Or you can create your own and record it and then edit it yourself. But the main thing about it this time is just the edit. So if you are going to record it yourself, don't worry about the cinematography as much. Don't worry about the
just make sure that the cuts you're
lighting.
making make sense with each other, like that they feel like they're the same story.
Yeah, it's mainly
Even
about
if they
the
are from
editing
different
so that
things.
it feels like it's coming from the same story. It feels like, if you have somebody talking inside of a house in one scene and you're taking it from online, or you're taking it from a movie, and you're doing another scene which is looking like a dinosaur is coming towards the house, make it feel like it's, edited around it to make it feel like it's coming from the same movie, even if it was taken from two different things. And that's the exercise. Other than that, all I'm going to mention is that we don't have any studies next week. We are off, so enjoy your week, enjoy the break. Use that time to either catch up on anything you want. You can use that time to do the exercise if you'd like, or you can just relax and enjoy your week. But we'll be back. What is it? March 21st. We'll be back on that Monday. So thank you, everybody, for staying till the end, and see you guys next week.
Good night, guys. See you next week. Well, the week after, because it's still Thursday.